Meanwhile, Russia says it is discussing a swap of 31 civilians with Ukraine. The Prime Minister and other European leaders are set to meet in Washington today, urging President Donald Trump not to bow to Vladimir Putin's demands in peace talks. It follows from Russia's apparent success at last week's Alaska summit, which reportedly led to President Trump considering Ukraine giving up regions of return for ceasefire. However, Downing Street had suggested that Sir Keir Starmer would back a Ukraine peace deal without a ceasefire as a precondition. Here, meanwhile, pubs are pulling their last pints at an alarming rate as 8 pubs every week are shutting for good in the first half of this year. Government figures show 209 pubs were demolished or converted by June as rising taxes, higher wages and business rates hit the industry hard. Pub bosses call the closures heartbreaking and are urging the Treasury for relief and tax support in the upcoming autumn budget. GBNews can exclusively reveal that Prince Harry has paid a special tribute to his late grandfather Prince Philip in a personal letter secretly placed at the National Memorial Arboretum. That letter was placed by a friend of the Duke of Sussex after Friday's National Service of Remembrance at the Burma Star Memorial in Staffordshire to avoid drawing attention. In that letter, Prince Harry said, quote, "For me, this anniversary carries an added layer of meaning. My late grandfather served in the Pacific Campaign," and continues to say he spoke with quiet humility about those years, but I know how deeply he respected all who stood beside him in that theatre of war. Well, the Duke of Sussex was understood to be close to his late grandfather before he died and previously described him as a man of service and great humour. 100 NHS diagnostic centres in England are now open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. That move to extend opening hours aims to cut waiting times and speed up diagnoses for thousands of patients. More than 7 million checks and scans have been carried out since the extension in July. GB News spoke to Care Minister Stephen Kinnock earlier about that announcement.
A vitally important role in terms of maximising access for people. So if it's open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, even people with busy working lives can very rapidly get an appointment. They have the whole spectrum of diagnostics from MRI scans to CAT scans to X-rays. And it's going to really help because they're embedded in communities. They're in your local shopping centre, maybe in your local university.
Stephen Kinnock there speaking to us earlier today. Well, Chancellor Rachel Reeves is preparing to roll back environmental protections to speed up infrastructure projects. The Treasury is drawing up plans for another planning reform bill which could scrap parts of the European nature rules developers say block major schemes. Ms Reeves insists the changes are vital to kickstart growth and improve living standards. It follows from her repeated criticism of bats and newts as obstacles for economic growth. The mother of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was shot dead in her home in Liverpool, is urging communities to speak out against gun crime. Olivia's death was the 3rd fatal shooting within just a week in Merseyside. And now her mother and other bereaved families work with the group Evolve to reclaim the areas worst affected by serious and organised crime. 3 years on, Olivia's mother Cheryl says the pain of losing her daughter is indescribable and wants no other family to suffer the same. Members of Evolve say they are happy with the progress that the group is making.
I think one of the biggest successes of the Evolve project has been the 300% increase in community intelligence from our communities. That is obviously really significant because it means the communities do have more confidence in the police now. They're coming forward, they're telling the police or Crime Stoppers or whatever route they're using, they're telling them what's going on, and that means the police can take action against these criminals that are causing this harm. So I think that's a really positive narrative in terms of the relationships that have been built between the police and the community since then.
And more than 6,000 new words have been added to the Cambridge Dictionary, including slang known to the likes of Martin and Mark White, well, skibbity, delulu and tradwife among them. The update also reflects new work habits with terms like mouse jiggler and environmental concern with forever chemicals. Editors say social media is driving much of the change. That's it from me, skibbity-doo, delulu, see you soon.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And, of course, the markets for you this hour. The pound will buy you $1.353 and €1.159. The price of gold, £2,471.97 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is 9,132 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sam Francis. Now, later today, President Volodymyr Zelensky will meet with President Donald J. Trump at the White House after their disastrous last meeting back in February. Now, this time, other European leaders, including Sir Keir Starmer, will also be in attendance. And tonight's historic meet be the final step towards ending Ukraine's war with Russia, or to be yet another false start. Well, earlier on, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, shared this video as he heads to Washington, D.C. for those crucial crunch talks with Zelensky and Trump and also these EU leaders later on today. Let's take a little listen.
This war in Ukraine has been going on a really long time now, 3+ years. Hugely impacted the Ukrainians, who suffered hugely, but it's also impacted Europe, it's impacted every single family and community in the United Kingdom. And so everybody wants it to end, not least the Ukrainians. But we've got to get this right. We've got to make sure there is peace, that it is lasting peace, and that it is fair and that it is just. And that's why I'm travelling to Washington with other European leaders to discuss this face-to-face with President Trump and President Zelensky.
OK, let's go right now. Live pictures. This is a picture of Keir Starmer landing there in Maryland. You can see that as the United Kingdom, the aeroplane, the one that Boris Johnson commissioned, that at the time the Labour Party were very dismissive of. I digress. Sir Keir Starmer landing in Maryland before being transported over to Washington, D.C. because, of course, to the White House ahead of these crucial talks. Begs the big question. What's the point of these European leaders coming in to poke their nose in, some might say? It seems to be this is very much a talk between Donald Trump and Zelensky themselves, and the next port of call, presumably, will be Vladimir Putin. Why are the European leaders going there? This is the big question I think we need to address. Seems to be at odds in terms of strategy. We're hearing a red line for Donald Trump, a red line for Vladimir Putin, and always has been. Do not advance Ukraine towards NATO membership. But number 10 seem at odds with that. We heard earlier on today, Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO membership, said number 10, at complete odds with the position of those in that room tonight. Well, let's now speak with GBNews' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, we can see pictures there of Sir Keir Starmer touching down in America. Big question is, what's the point? Why is he there?
Well, he's there to show solidarity with Volodymyr Zelensky, as are the other key European leaders, along with the EU Commission President and also the head of NATO. You're about to see, after it gets to the end of the runway, turns around and comes back, UK Force One, whatever we want to call it. You're right, saying that Labour didn't seem to be too keen on this particular development in terms of us having an aircraft that could fly the flag for the UK. But our Prime Minister's done an awful lot of miles in that particular aircraft and its sister aircraft over recent months, as you see it now coming back into view ahead of the UK Prime Minister coming down the steps of that aircraft and then off to Washington proper for those talks. Now, as we understand it, Martin, you're right that none of the European leaders are going to be involved in the talks. This is purely symbolic and about showing the US president how Europe is united behind Volodymyr Zelensky, and they do not want to see him forced into a decision that is not just and is not fair. And quite what that deal could comprise of, we're not exactly sure. Suggestions that Vladimir Putin has said that he wants the land that Russia currently occupies more or less in the Donbass region of Ukraine. And that would be seen, of course, by many, and no doubt by the vast majority of people in Ukraine, as rewarding the misdeeds of Russia in invading Ukraine in the first place. But it may be a compromise that President Zelensky and his people will have to make if they want that lasting peace with their neighbour.
And it's fascinating to see this power play now, because you're absolutely right, Mark White. I mean, this is Keir Starmer's 31st foreign trip since becoming Prime Minister, racking up over 100,000 air miles. I hope he's got his rewards card, Mark White. He'll be able to fly around the world again for free at this rate. I'm joking, of course, but this is a moment in history where Sir Keir Starmer wants to be there. But I wonder if it's actually that helpful, Mark White. We're seeing the European leaders' demands quite at odds with those of Putin and Trump, particularly around NATO membership, pushing for further sanctions from Donald Trump. Marco Rubio dismissing that as unhelpful. Vladimir Putin won't listen. Mark White, to put it in polite terms, suitable for daytime television, all this like just spare parts at a wedding.
Well, I think you could certainly make that argument, and I wouldn't really argue too strongly against it, but it's about the optics of this. They won't remember back to February, and oh my God, it was such a car crash that we witnessed with Volodymyr Zelensky, President Trump, Vice President Vance and others in the Oval Office, and it just deteriorated. And just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, it got worse. And I think both sides are absolutely determined to avoid a repeat of that. And to that end, as I say, European leaders, they want to be there. They want to show that they have this man's back, that they are ready to step in should the US really decide that it wants to pull back from Ukraine. If Ukraine feels, for instance, that giving Russia effectively large tracts of Ukrainian soil is not really what it can accept. It's too unpalatable for the people of Ukraine. If it does that, then I think there's no doubt that the US will step back. What role they'll then occupy, that is yet to be determined. It may be that they still provide arms, but they do it on the basis of what they seem to be moving towards at the moment, which is actually selling arms to Ukraine rather than donating arms to Ukraine. But what would be the case with regards to the really important, vital intelligence sharing, the satellite real-time information that Ukraine relies on to be able to target sites in Russia when they are on the offensive, and of course to defend itself from incoming munitions from Russia? What kind of guarantees would still be in place if Ukraine doesn't want to go down the road of entering into this deal? We should just tell the viewers it's perfectly evident, but the cameras are just positioning to get the shot of Sir Keir Starmer coming down to the bottom of the steps there when he does depart that aircraft. Onto that aircraft, by the way, I think that was one of the better decisions of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. I think it's a great thing to have around the world that really does highlight the UK with this aircraft. The Americans have got Air Force One, that mighty Boeing 747, and that is a sight to behold. But this is not a bad alternative here with the Union flag, a variation of that on the tail of this aircraft. It does help symbolise our nation, I think, Martin.
Yeah, I think the door is just coming open there. We can expect to see Sir Keir Starmer emerging any moment. I hope it's changed, Mark. His travel attire was he was in a cardigan. Nothing is guaranteed to strike fear into the heart of Vladimir Putin than Sir Keir Starmer in a cardigan. He'll be stepping out shortly, Mark, but you're absolutely right to talk about how they jumped upon Boris's jumbo jet when it was first commissioned as deeply little England with its Union flag plastered down the side. Boris Johnson said it was a great advert for Britain, and yet here we are, once in power, Sir Keir Starmer happy to rack up yet more of those air miles. Mark White, always a pleasure. Of course, we'll be crossing back to you throughout the rest of the show. Let's bring in now my next guest, and that's the defence analyst and the former army officer, Patrick Benham-Crosswell. Patrick, welcome to the show as we wait for Sir Keir Starmer to emerge from the aircraft there, just landed at Maryland, around about an hour's transfer to Washington, D.C. On the strategic issues, I'd like to ask you about what many people are saying is continued meddling from Sir Keir Starmer and European Union leaders. Why, for example, are they pushing towards NATO membership, something which all the way along Vladimir Putin and indeed previous successive Russian presidents have always said would be a red line?
To be honest, I have absolutely no idea. If you take a pragmatic view of these things, which sort of military people tend to do, and leave the ideology to politicians, President Putin has always said that Ukraine in NATO is an existential threat. And if you look at a map, you can understand why. And I've had briefings over the years from senior but anonymous sources saying that's exactly right. It can't make any sense to be a Russian president with Ukraine in NATO. It becomes militarily and culturally impossible. Whether that was the only casus belli doesn't really matter. But if and I think Donald Trump understands it, or President Trump understands it. So if Keir Starmer's going to go down that line, then he's just going to get told, well, you're a fool.
Because the whole point of this all along, one of Donald Trump's, if you like, chess moves on the European continent was to finally get European nations to cough up 5% GDP towards NATO, which many agree they should have been doing for decades. They were more or less living off the back of American security protection. Donald Trump had said in his first term that needed to end. And as a consequence now, the European leaders have been forced to cough up more to defend the continent, Patrick. Surely now it's not about NATO defending Ukraine. It's about Europe stepping in and actually being a deterrent to Putin's advances, period.
Well, indeed, but ramping up military expenditure takes a little bit of time, particularly if you've got black holes of the size that Rachel Reeves keeps on finding. And of course, spending the money is one thing, turning it into capability is another step down the road. Meantime, here we are. The Russians and the Ukrainians are in a war of attrition that the Russians have the upper hand in and have had for some time. And will be, that's the status quo. If you want to change that, then you've got to bring something to the party now.
And Patrick, of course, one of the hugely thorny topics, and nobody can guess the answer to this question, but we know it's going to be central to this discussion, is some people have called it the carving up of Ukraine, the territory that Putin has managed to encompass. Of course, the Crimea went a long time ago, and at that point, Barack Obama didn't seem to stand up to Putin. Now Donbass region and others. It's written into the Ukrainian constitution that it's illegal to surrender that territory. But do you think that when push comes to shove, if this war needs to end, there's going to have to be a significant and perhaps unpleasant surrender of that territory by Ukraine to Putin? Somewhere
on the line, you could look at this in terms of lines on maps. I think had Ukraine said, do you know what, we'll be neutral early on, then perhaps this war could have stopped or not gone as far as it has. I think it's unrealistic to expect President Putin to walk away from land that he's captured for the price of, pick your estimate, 500,000, 1 million casualties. Any more than it's going to be easy for Ukraine to accept the reality that they've lost 20% of their country because they were outgunned and outfought. I mean, nobody wanted to get here, but that's not the point. If you want to stop the killing, then you have to change something. And of course, the overriding priority for President Trump and indeed President Putin isn't so much a line on a map in Ukraine. It's not inadvertently setting off on a path that ends up in World War III and nuclear Armageddon. And people forget that. Keir Starmer shouldn't, of course, because he's one of the people in the room, who has got a finger on a nuclear trigger. And we definitely don't want to go there. So any calls for greater Western involvement fighting alongside Ukraine against the Russians starts to look dangerously like another step towards World War III. And I don't think Keir Starmer has a mandate for that.
No, well, let's hope not. Thank you very much for joining us, Defence Analyst and former Army Officer Patrick Benham-Crosswell. Let's bring back in Mark White now. Mark White, as we're still awaiting the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, to step out of that aircraft there, just landed in Maryland. I believe Donald Trump is taking to Truth Social again.
Yes, he has, absolutely. While we wait for Sir Keir Starmer to get that cardigan off and get his suit on, we have had a response from Donald Trump to some of the criticism he's been getting in the newspapers across there. He said on Truth Social just now, "I've settled 6 wars in 6 months. One of them a possible nuclear disaster, and yet I have to read and listen to the Wall Street Journal and many others who truly don't have a clue tell me everything that I'm doing wrong on the Russia-Ukraine mess that is Sleepy Joe Biden's war, not mine. I'm only here," he says, "to stop it, not to prosecute it any further. It would have never happened," he said, "if I was president. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I don't need the advice of people who've been working on all these conflicts for years and were never able to do a thing to stop them. They are stupid," he says. Stupid people with no common sense, intelligence or understanding, and they only make the Russia-Ukraine disaster more difficult to fix. Despite all of my lightweight and very jealous critics, I'll get it done. I always do. He always likes to shoot from the hip, does Donald John Trump, and he has done there, as we see the officials with Sir Keir Starmer just exiting that aircraft, UK Force One, waiting for Sir Keir Starmer himself to come down those steps and to be officially greeted in Washington before heading off to the White House, Martin. But clearly, Donald Trump just, when he reads, and he does read, so much that's said about him, it gets under his skin. It's clear that, he's very intolerant of a lot of those in the mainstream media, particularly in the United States, who he really feels are out to get him.
Yeah, Donald Trump once again sitting on the fence. Mark White, that's his forte, is it not? Look, he says it as he sees it. And that's precisely the point. Mark White, is it protocol for a Prime Minister to keep us waiting like this? We've had almost a couple of football teams worth of staff come off that plane so far, and Sir Keir Starmer is keeping us dangling.
Oh, listen, you know what these cardigans are like. The zippers can be a bit difficult at times. They get stuck. He's probably had some help having to get that off.
On a serious point, I wonder, Mark White, if this kind of attack by Donald Trump about outsiders trying to advise him on how to conduct negotiations in wars, I wonder if it's not just aimed at the press, but I wonder if it's a forward-shooting bow shot, if you like, to what's expected later on. Emmanuel Macron, Ursula von der Leyen, a German defence minister, so useless, she ordered the wrong missiles in Germany. Sir Keir Starmer, about to puff up their chests and give out their own advice on how to conduct these negotiations between Zelensky, Putin and the rest of it. I wonder, actually, if this is a broadside against them, Mark White.
I think you make an excellent point there, Martin. What did we get under 3 years of the Biden administration from both the US and its European allies? We got inertia. Nothing at all, as we see now. So Keir Starmer, UK Prime Minister, coming down the steps of that British aircraft onto the tarmac in Washington.
Yeah, it's around about a 50-minute transfer from that. It's a US military base. Of course, that's safest protocol for a world leader to come in, to be transferred to the White House ahead. I think it's around about 6:15, is it, Mark White? We've got just short of 3 hours of Zelensky arriving at the White House. And there goes Sir Keir Starmer into his transfer vehicle. And the other European Union leaders will be landing shortly. Mark White, they're going to convene presumably ahead of the meeting with Trump, but they're very much peripheral figures. They won't actually get a seat at the table tonight, will they, Mark? They're just kind of doing their own thing on the sidelines. Again, back to my first question some half an hour ago, Mark White. What's the point?
Yeah, well, they'll get a seat after the fact, if you like, and find out what was said afterwards. I think he'll be enjoying this motorcade, though, won't he? It's a bit of an upgrade on the odd Range Rover or two that he has in his motorcade here in the UK. There, it's going to be bigger and more showy. So there you go. That's something at least. You'll get a nice ride to the White House on that. But getting back to your point that you raised, which I think is an excellent point, before he emerged onto the steps of that aircraft. Before President Trump got back into the White House, it was inertia. There was nothing happening. The US were content just to condemn Russia, as were its European allies, and no attempts of any sort of meaningful nature, it seems, were ever made to get the sides around the table, apart from just a few months after the war broke out. And then that was it. For years, nothing happened. And the US and its European allies seemed just to content by just pumping more money into Ukraine. Never enough, actually, to give Ukraine a decisive victory on the battlefield, just enough to keep its head above the water, to stop it being defeated by Russia, and so it continued, and it seemed never ending. At least, whatever you might personally think of Donald Trump, he has made it a mission since getting into the White House again to try to bring the sides around the table, to try at least to get them to come to some kind of agreement, however unpalatable it might be to either side. At least he seems to be trying, Martin.
Mark White, I think you're exactly right. And Donald Trump has repeatedly said that he just wants the killing to end. He wants this battle to end. He talks a lot of times about the human casualties of this war. Every single week, thousands of young men getting put into the meat grinder in Ukraine. And very much the language now is, it's up to Zelensky now to broker peace, over to you guys, seeing as the interim manager, if you like, finally getting these two people together, pathologically hate each other. Make no mistake, there'll be no love lost at all between Putin and Zelensky. But what's plan B, Mark? Another forever war?
Well, this is it. I mean, there's absolutely no love lost between each other. How can there be after 3.5 years of this relentless butchery that has taken place on Ukrainian soil? But, you know, wars have to end. So at some point, a deal has got to be made. It's just whichever side or both sides can agree to, yes, compromises that are deeply unpalatable, but at the end of the day, if it stops the deaths that, as you say, Martin, are taking place in their thousands, then perhaps the bullet needs to be bitten by both sides to try to bring an end to this and have finally some peace on the continent of Europe.
And of course, the prevailing wind, Mark White, is that the media certainly seem to believe that this will end up stacking in Vladimir Putin's favour in terms of territorial gains, in terms of flexing on the world stage. And certainly a lot of the liberal media, the ones that Donald Trump just mentioned and name-checked, seem to think he's some kind of lapdog to Vladimir Putin. And I don't suppose anybody will ever be righteously and fully pleased in this, Mark White. But I think a great many people watching this show feel quite concerned that this has taken endless billions of pounds from the United Kingdom taxpayer. Certainly, Donald Trump made no secret when he was getting elected that he wanted to end this war, end America's involvement, end the endless billions. So in many senses now, it's over to Putin. It's over to Zelensky.
Yeah, I mean, you heard, interestingly, from Sir Keir Starmer in that clip that we got from him on the aircraft on his way across the Atlantic, where he said it's a war that's not just being felt in Ukraine, but it's being felt right here in the UK. And that absolutely is true. We've seen it in fuel costs that have risen, in prices in the supermarket, in the deep uncertainty we have with regard to the security situation in our own country, cyber attacks, other Russia, we're told, inspired attacks that were targeted on the West. And we're seeing it in the many billions of pounds that are being given by the UK and by other countries around the world to Ukraine on a regular basis to continue prosecuting this war, with no effective outcome yet for Ukraine in terms of a decisive ability to push Russia back out. So you've got to ask at some stage, however you might want to argue, and you can be very reasonably arguing, I think, that it will not end well for Ukraine in the sense that they're giving vast tracts of their land to an aggressor. But what is the solution? To keep on fighting, for thousands more Ukrainians to die, and for us in the West to continue pumping many, many billions of pounds into the Ukrainian war effort?
Mark White, excellent points, well made. A great start to the show, and I'll see you again throughout the rest of the show, and hopefully you won't get changed into your cardigan. Mark White, always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much. Now, loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including shocking new data that shows that white working-class pupils are the least likely to attend a top British university. Is this final proof that white kids have been betrayed by successive governments? That's next in this GB News. It is Brisbane's News Channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow, quite similar to today, quite a lot of cloud around, but there will be some bright or sunny spells and just a few scattered showers in the southwest. Most places dry thanks to this area of high pressure. It's been a very warm one across parts of western Scotland. Lots of sunshine here, but around the high we have been seeing quite a bit of cloud streaming in, particularly to eastern areas, and that cloud likely to thicken up overnight. In the southwest of England, we've also seen 1 or 2 showers affecting Pembrokeshire also, and still 1 or 2 more of those to come overnight, maybe even the odd heavy one, but most places staying dry, most places keeping the temperatures up as well in the teens, perhaps down into single figures in rural parts of Scotland where it does stay clear. Quite a great start then to tomorrow morning. Maybe that cloud thick enough for a bit of drizzle across northeast Scotland and hills of northeast England, but generally it will be a dry start, and western Scotland again should do okay for sunshine. Elsewhere starting fairly dull, I suspect, through the central belts. Quite a bit of cloud coming in overnight across Northern Ireland too, and most of England and Wales seeing a cloudy start to Tuesday, but some breaks in the cloud on the south coast of England, south coast of Wales and the west coast of Wales too. It's in the far west I think we'll see the best of the sunshine again on Tuesday, but again the chance, Pembrokeshire, Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, of 1 or 2 showers breaking out during Tuesday. Very hit and miss, but you might even catch a rumble of thunder, see a flash of lightning. So a few heavy showers here, but many places staying dry, quite grey again in the east, and as a result pretty chilly temperatures on those North Sea coasts with a strengthening breeze only in the teens, whereas where we see some sunshine we should see temperatures into the 20s. Again, a lot of cloud to start with on Wednesday. We're a bit more optimistic. We'll see a bit more sunshine coming through during the day. Shouldn't have any showers in the southwest either. Quite a fresh feel again on those eastern coasts with some sunshine elsewhere. Temperatures in the low 20s.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Commuters should prepare for delays on the A725 northbound as roadworks are underway at Whistleberry Road. Meanwhile, motorists on the M6 southbound in Cheshire East will encounter lane closures between junctions 17 and 16 due to a broken down vehicle. Additionally, an incident has occurred on the A36 northbound in Wiltshire near the A303, causing further traffic challenges. Railway passengers should anticipate disruptions to services between Plymouth and Penzance, as well as between Weymouth and Dorchester West on Great Western Railway. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back. Time is 3:37. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, here's your chance to live mortgage or rent-free for an entire year and get a bonus £5,000 on top in your bank in the latest Great British Giveaway. And guess what? If you haven't even got a mortgage or rent to pay, don't worry, you can still trouser 15 grand. Here's all the details.
We want to send some of those monthly financial stresses packing this August with your chance to be mortgage or rent-free for 12 whole months. We'll give you a cash lump sum that equals 12 of your monthly mortgage or rent payments, right up to an amazing £20,000. We'll also throw in an extra £5,000 on top of that for good measure, because why not? And if you don't have a mortgage or rent to pay, lucky you. We'll give you £15,000 tax-free cash instead. What are you waiting for? Lines will close on the 29th of August. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. 1 entry costs £2.50 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB15 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 29th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck. Now, for the third straight year running, white pupils are now the least likely group to get into top universities in Britain. Official data from the Department for Education out today shows that only 11.7% of white kids are attending the highest ranking third of universities by the age of 19. Now, by comparison, 12.1% of black kids get there, 15.5% of those who are mixed race, and 18.6% of Asian pupils make the places. Well, let's now speak with my guest. That's the academic and the author, Lisa Mackenzie. Lisa, always a pleasure to have you on the show. The thing that leapt out at me, and I know will chime with you as well, is at the very, very bottom of this pile, white, working class kids. Only 3% of them make it to one of Britain's top universities. Black pupils, 4 times more likely. Mixed race kids, 5 times more likely. And Asian kids, 6 times more likely to go to university, a top university, versus white working class kids. Now, Lisa Mackenzie, I know you speak passionately on this. I think these kids have been completely and utterly betrayed.
Well, yes, they have. And thank you, Martin, because you know what? We need to keep talking about this. The first time this came to my notice was in 2011, when there was a report out in 2011 that this was happening. And every year since, we've talked about this, we've debated it, and yet the figures get worse and worse every year. I'm not surprised, actually, with the figures at all. I've worked in universities for 20 years, and it has always been the case that white working class young people and older people are not getting into universities. But it's no surprise, because they're also not getting into the arts, into politics, into any of those what we now consider middle class spaces. So, to be fair, working class people across the board are less likely to be in what we traditionally think of as middle class spaces, but out of all of the working class, the white working class are now finding themselves at the bottom.
Now, Lisa Mackenzie, I've been talking about this for probably as long as you. You know, I've been going about this for years and years and years. The data has been this way for over 20 straight years, from kids starting at nursery all the way to university. It's been this way for 2.5 decades. I've been into Parliament, I've sat down with parliamentarians of all colours and said to them, when are you going to do something about this? Lisa, they haven't done anything about it, ever. And when you say to them, well, why not? They say things to me like this. Well, we know the data is this, but we're a bit concerned if we speak out for these kids, it might look a bit racist. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think this is across the board, actually, for many different things. People not wanting to say something because it looks or might sound racist. But we really need to get over this. I mean, 10 years ago, I was an expert in Parliament. They'd brought me in to talk about this with MPs. And one of the things that they kept saying was that, well, it's the white working class. They don't have any ambition. You know, other groups have got ambition. You know, we don't know what to do with them. And what they keep doing is sort of victim blaming and saying that there's something wrong with the white working class, rather than there's something wrong with the structure of the system. And I've faced this now for such a long time. Like I said, I was in Parliament at a select committee, and they kept telling me over and over again that it's white working class parents are not parenting well, white working class kids are not ambitious, and you know, and really they're coming last because it's their own fault. And I keep hearing this year after year after year, when the truth is that this is systemic and structural. Resources have been given to inner city schools, particularly schools that are very mixed and very ethnically mixed, and white working class areas in the deindustrialised areas and the coast has really been starved of resources for many years, but not just on education, on everything.
Yeah, Lisa, there is this appalling victim-blaming narrative. I hear it myself, and you're exactly right. And look, let's be clear. You know, there is an amazing work ethic. I see it, you know, friends of mine who run the local corner shops, who put their kids through private school, Bangladeshis, Indians, and their kids achieve excellence. I love those families. I love those kids. Nobody is saying we want, you know, ethnic minorities to not do well. We want everyone to do well. But we want people to get help where it's required. And clearly the data shows us we've got a huge chasm of support for the white working classes. And that's my point. Another damning statistic, Lisa Mackenzie, today, entry into top universities for native English speakers is 42.8%. But those with the first language who's not English is 60.9%. And Lisa Mackenzie, that's because there have been a huge amount of laudable initiatives to encourage those children to prosper and be put forward for selection. That's the point. Give the help where it's needed. Be colourblind. Help the white kids.
Yeah, and that doesn't. I mean, that doesn't happen. You know, I'm currently in Nottinghamshire, and I live in an ex-mining community. And so what I see all the time, I see white working class kids where I live. You know, again, it's that same thing that happened to me. That, you know, when I left school at 16 with no qualifications, there was no expectation that I would do anything with my life. And unfortunately, you know, we're 40 years on, and this is still happening. Working class kids at 16 are still having, you know, they've got people in front of them who say you will not achieve anything. And this is still a problem. And I'm sure the viewers today, most of them would look back, if you're working class, you'll look back on your own education and you'll know that no one really expected you to do anything with your lives apart from factory work or, where I live, in the coal mines. Unfortunately, those good jobs that were well paid have also gone. And so there is nothing left now.
But the key point, Lisa Mackenzie, you know, when I was the first lad in my family to make it to university, and we got a full grant. My dad was down the pit, and we got a National Coal Board top-up grant. You know, we could go to university because there was the help and support. I wouldn't be here now. I sincerely don't think I'd be here now unless people from communities like mine got some help from the government. I've paid that back with treacle on top and baubles on top many, many times over. Those working class kids, they need help. And Lisa Mackenzie, thank you for all the work you do. You're amazing. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now, coming up next, 8 pubs a week shut their doors for good across the UK over the first half of the year amid rising tax and labour costs. How on earth can we bring some good cheer to our boozers? But for now, if you're in search of some holiday sun, then here is the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
The heat isn't quite as intense as it has been across parts of Europe, but nonetheless it is still hot and sunny for many Mediterranean areas, and indeed across the Canary Islands and Madeira, fine and very warm here. The heat's still there across Iberia though, so some very high temperatures here. A few thunderstorms for southern France and across inland parts of Italy, but mostly sunny in coastal parts. And Greece and Turkey will stay largely fine, sunny and very warm over the next few days, with lots of sunshine and temperatures in the low 30s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Yeah. Chris, let's have a look at, I think, one of my favourite stories this morning. And this is the daughter of the inventor of the Freddo chocolate bar, which we have in front of us. Really? Now, I remember at school these were 10p. 10p, 20p?
You remember them at school?
Yeah.
So we had a discussion in the green room, and I was absolutely hammered.
Are they the same size as the words?
I think they've got smaller, you know.
Of course they have.
Or maybe I've got bigger.
Well,
No,
we have all got bigger. You haven't actually got any bigger. You're still tiny. But yeah, they have got smaller. Shrinkflation is a thing.
Is a thing.
Yeah. Depending on where you buy them, you can actually spend £1 for one of these, and they are tiny, weeny, as you can see there. I haven't bitten mine off yet.
18 grams, they're tiny.
The more shocking part of this entire story, Chris Akabusi, is that Chris is the only man on earth.
I've never heard of a Freddo.
What?
I've never heard of a Freddo. And look, there's no way. And then Dawn was trying to tell me that they were around when I was a kid. Absolutely.
You haven't lived. Eat it now. Open.
There's no way that a Freddo. I don't. You know. And then I was thinking. He says here that Freddo is used as a common yardstick to track inflation. No, it used to be the Mars bar.
No, it's the Freddo.
It used to be the Mars bar.
The humble Freddo.
This is. So what's so special about the Freddo?
Just eat it. It's amazing. Cheers.
Oh, cheers, my dear.
Bing.
Well, Chris, tracking the financial index yesterday,
yes,
I decided to have a Mars bar, and I was able to have 2 of them because they were so small.
Yeah.
So tiny,
absolutely,
and thin.
Absolutely.
A disgrace of what a Mars bar used to be, or an Aztec bar, or a Topic bar, or
there you go.
Anything, yeah.
But you don't remember Freddo.
No, so
we are the same
wagon wheels,
generation.
curly whirly.
Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 4. Now, over 200 pubs have closed their doors for good across the UK in the first half of this year because of tax rises and crippling running costs. Now, it takes the total number of boozers vanishing from communities since 2020 to 2,283, leaving many wondering what the future of British boozers holds. Are we losing our beloved pub culture forever? Let's now speak with the pub landlord, Clive Watson. Clive, pleasure to have you on the show. How many times do we have to hear this story about British pubs closing down before we do something about it? What would you like to see done?
Well, there's loads of things that need to be done. I mean, firstly, we can't have this annual cycle of increases in national living wage beyond inflation. More recently, as you know, employers' national insurance going up, alcohol duty going up, and then rates last year went up in the budget as well. So every year, every publican is looking at the budget, trembling as to see what the government's going to hit us with next. And you can't run a business like that.
And Clive, you're the founder of the City Pub Group. Do you think that what's happening here is it's just a war on the smaller enterprises? You know, the kind of get on your bike pub founders like yourself, and the real winner here is just going to be the huge conglomerates. It means less choice. It means a less diverse ecosystem for people to go have a pint at.
Exactly. I mean, you're looking at a lot of publicans who are probably making, before the last year's budget, 50, 60k a year. They're working their socks off. And then they get hammered with all these increases. Their annual income is going to go down to about 25, 30, if that. What are they going to do? Are they going to carry on working 60, 70 hours a week, or are they going to hand back the keys? And this is the problem. It's not that people don't want to go to the pub. It's just that the government, not just this government, successive governments, have made it more and more difficult to run a viable pub business.
Do you think there's something else going on here, Clive, and that is a kind of longer-term puritanism? They're against alcohol, they seem to be against red meat, they're against cars. Is that it? Are they against fun?
Absolutely. It's a sort of, as you say, some puritanical streak running down the backbones of these politicians who don't act. I mean, people say to me, golly, the price of a pint is so expensive. But it's only expensive because of the increase in duty, increase of government taxes, increase of employers' NI. We don't want to put the prices up. We don't want to put people off coming to the pub. But we're having to increase the prices to keep up with the inflation created by government. And I think, as you say, it's not necessarily about tax raising. It's about they just don't like people having a laugh, going out to the pub and enjoying themselves.
I think you might be right, because, you know, terrible things happen in pubs, like people talk about politics and say, perhaps the government isn't working for us. Thank you very much, Clive Watson, the founder of the City Pub Group. Always a pleasure, and please keep pouring for Britain. Thank you very, very much indeed. And coming up, President Volodymyr Zelensky will meet with Donald Trump and other European leaders, including Keir Starmer at the White House for Ukraine peace talks. Can they finally agree a deal and bring an end to the war? You can see their live pictures on your screen of the White House. That historic door. Back in February, when Zelensky went through there, it was the ultimate political car crash. Surely it can't be as bad tonight. It's around about 2 hours' time for that meeting to happen. We'll be live and direct from DC for you here on GB News, Britain's news channel. But now it's time for your weather.
Today's outlook: cool, calm and completely horizontal. Boxed Aircon sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow, quite similar to today. Quite a lot of cloud around, but there will be some bright or sunny spells and just a few scattered showers in the southwest. Most places dry thanks to this area of high pressure. It's been a very warm one across parts of western Scotland. Lots of sunshine here, but around the high we have been seeing quite a bit of cloud streaming in, particularly to eastern areas, and that cloud likely to thicken up overnight. In the southwest of England, we've also seen 1 or 2 showers affecting Pembrokeshire also, and still 1 or 2 more of those to come overnight, maybe even the odd heavy one, but most places staying dry, most places keeping the temperatures up as well in the teens, perhaps down into single figures in rural parts of Scotland where it does stay clear. Quite a grey start then to tomorrow morning. Maybe that cloud thick enough for a bit of drizzle across northeast Scotland and hills of northeast England, but generally it will be a dry start, and western Scotland again should do okay for sunshine. Elsewhere starting fairly dull, I suspect, through the central belts. Quite a bit of cloud coming in overnight across Northern Ireland too, and most of England and Wales seeing a cloudy start to Tuesday, but some breaks in the cloud on the south coast of England, south coast of Wales and the west coast of Wales too. It's in the far west I think we'll see the best of the sunshine again on Tuesday, but again the chance Pembrokeshire, Devon, Cornwall, Somerset of 1 or 2 showers breaking out during Tuesday. Very hit and miss, but you might even catch a rumble of thunder, see a flash of lightning. So a few heavy showers here, but many places staying dry, quite grey again in the east, and as a result pretty chilly temperatures on those North Sea coasts with a strengthening breeze only in the teens, whereas where we see some sunshine we should see temperatures into the 20s. Again, a lot of cloud to start with on Wednesday. We're a bit more optimistic. We'll see a bit more sunshine coming through during the day. Shouldn't have any showers in the southwest either. Quite a fresh feel again on those eastern coasts with some sunshine elsewhere. Temperatures in the low 20s.
Today's outlook: cool, calm and completely horizontal. Boxed Aircon sponsors the weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Motorists on the A725 northbound face disruption with no exit to Whistleberry Road due to roadworks. Drivers should follow the sign diversion. The M4 eastbound at junction 43 in Landesey is closed, with diversions in place. The M40 southbound in Oxfordshire has 2 lanes closed after a collision, with normal conditions expected this evening. The A43 northbound between junctions, A413 and A5 is congested. And on the trains, disruptions affect cross-country services between Plymouth and Penzance and Great Western Railway travellers between Weymouth and Dorchester West. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
There's just 2 weeks left to see how you could win your mortgage or rent paid for a whole year. That's a cash lump sum equivalent to 12 of your monthly mortgage or rent payments, right up to a whopping £20,000. Plus, we'll add an extra £5,000 on top for good measure. Make sure you don't miss out as lines close on the 29th of August. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB15 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 29th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. For today's show, President Zelensky will meet with President Donald J. Trump. You can see there live pictures on your screen of that famous White House entrance. Zelensky due to home interview in around about 2 hours' time, followed by other European leaders, including Keir Starmer at the White House for those Ukraine peace talks. But can they finally agree a deal and bring an end to the war? Or are we set for yet more scenes like this disaster?
Gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Meanwhile, an astonishing survey has shown that 87% of Brits now support deporting foreign rapists, and a further 47% claim immigration levels impact women's safety. On today's show, I'll be joined by the Women's Safety Initiative, who are calling for immigration limits from so-called dangerous countries. And shameful new data published today shows that white working-class pupils are now the least likely to attend a top British university. But with zero government initiatives in place to help them, is this final proof that white kids have been betrayed by successive governments? And a top police chief has said it is madness the amount of offences that shoplifters undertake before they are actually put behind bars, and also says they are set free by the courts to offend time and time again. I'll be talking to a common sense cop later in this hour. Welcome to the show. Well, history beckons at the White House. Volodymyr Zelensky due to arrive in around about 2 hours' time. Also, in the past hour, landed in Maryland, around about an hour away from the White House, Sir Keir Starmer, expected to be followed by Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President, and Emmanuel Macron, the German leaders, the Finnish leaders, over there to, quote, show support to Volodymyr Zelensky. Sir Keir Starmer there on your screens, touching down in America around about an hour ago. Incidentally, in that flag-festooned plane commissioned by Boris Johnson, the Labour Party called, they seem to have a big problem with it. When it was first commissioned for being plastered with Union flags, now being used by Sir Keir Starmer on his 30th trip abroad, over 100,000 air miles into the PM's belt, the most in history. What is the point of them being there, though? These talks are between Zelensky and Trump, or the European leaders simply spare parts at a wedding. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. Now it's your headline zone. Here's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Fast approaching 4 minutes past 4. Well, as we were just hearing, Sir Keir Starmer has now arrived in the United States ahead of those talks later on Ukraine at the White House. The meeting, though, comes just hours after Volodymyr Zelensky accused Russia of strikes that killed 10 people, saying that Vladimir Putin wants to humiliate diplomatic efforts. Downing Street has signalled Sir Keir Starmer could back a peace deal without a ceasefire as a precondition, while Trump has already ruled out Ukraine joining NATO or reclaiming Crimea. Talks are expected later to focus on potential robust security guarantees for Kyiv, though the Kremlin has yet to respond. Well, just staying with international news for a short moment, we're hearing reports on the Reuters news agency that Hamas has told mediators there that it does support and approve the latest ceasefire plans put forward by mediators from Egypt and Qatar. But of course, that comes as fears are now growing of an imminent Israeli invasion, or offensive, they would say, in Gaza City, where thousands of residents are now fleeing west today further south under heavy bombardment that continues in the region. So that latest update just in, Hamas is approving, they say, via mediators, the latest ceasefire plan. Back here, though, pubs are vanishing from Britain's streets at a rapid pace, with 8 shutting for good every single week in the first half of this year. Official figures show 209 pubs were demolished or converted by June, as rising taxes, higher wages and business rates take their toll. Industry leaders call the closures heartbreaking and are urging the Treasury to deliver tax relief in the autumn budget. 100 NHS diagnostic centres in England are now open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. The move aims to cut waiting times and speed up diagnosis, with more than 7 million checks and scans carried out since July. Care Minister Stephen Kinnock told us that the changes will help thousands of patients get seen sooner.
A vitally important role in terms of maximising access for people. So if it's open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, even people with busy working lives can very rapidly get an appointment. They have the whole spectrum of diagnostics, from MRI scans to CAT scans to X-rays, and it's going to really help because they're embedded in communities. They're in your local shopping centre, maybe in your local university.
Chancellor Rachel Reeves is preparing to ease environmental protections to accelerate infrastructure schemes across the country. The Treasury is drafting another planning reform bill that could scrap parts of the European nature rules blamed for blocking developments. Ms Reeves says the changes are essential to drive growth and rise living standards, repeating her criticism of bats and newts as economic obstacles. Well, that comes as reports this afternoon are also suggesting the Chancellor is now considering a property tax overhaul, replacing stamp duty with a new property tax on homes sold for more than £500,000. The Treasury proposal, still at an early stage, could also pave the way for a reform of council tax, which is based on 1990s property values. Rachel Reeves says the changes would aim to boost fairness and raise revenue without breaking Labour's pledge not to increase taxes on working people. In other news, the mother of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, shot dead in her own home in Liverpool, is urging communities to speak out against gun crime. Her death was the third fatal shooting in a week on Merseyside. Now, Olivia's mother Cheryl and other bereaved families are working with the group Evolve to reclaim neighbourhoods worst hit by serious and organised crime. 3 years on, Cheryl says the pain is indescribable and that no other family should suffer the same.
I think one of the biggest successes of the Evolve project has been the 300% increase in community intelligence from our communities. That is obviously really significant because it means the communities do have more confidence in the police now. They're coming forward, they're telling the police or Crime Stoppers or whatever route they're using, they're telling them what's going on, and that means the police can take action against these criminals that are causing this harm. So I think that's a really positive narrative in terms of the relationships that have been built between the police and the community since then.
And more than 6,000 new words have been added to the Cambridge Dictionary, with editors crediting social media for driving much of the change. Slang terms such as skibbity, delulu and tradwife now sit alongside new workplace jargon like mouse jiggler and environmental phrases such as forever chemical. Editors say only words likely to stand the test of time are included, with internet culture continuing to shape the evolution of English. Mouse jiggler. Martin, perhaps that would be you. Those are the latest headlines. Before I hand you back, though, let's check on those markets.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here are those all-important markets. The pound will buy you $1.353 and 1.159 euros. The price of gold, £2,471 and 97 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 9,132 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sam. I can assure you I've never jiggled a mouse. Back to serious news. Later today, President Volodymyr Zelensky will now meet with Donald J. Trump at the White House after their disastrous meeting last February. Now, this time, other European leaders, including Keir Starmer, who touched down in the US a short while ago, as you can see now on your screens in Maryland, well, he will also be in attendance. Might tonight's historic meet be the final step towards ending Ukraine's war with Russia, or will it be yet another false start? Well, let's speak now with GB News' Homeland Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So, pictures there on our screen. Keir Starmer has touched down in Maryland. The first landing of the other European leaders, Macron, Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President. What's the point of them being there? I keep asking myself, they're showing solidarity to what end? This is now surely a conversation between Trump and Zelensky. The rest, they're spare parts of the wedding.
Well, it's certainly a good point. They would argue, I'm sure, that it is really important to show Volodymyr Zelensky that they are full square behind him, that whatever happens in terms of the negotiations with Donald Trump, Russia and Ukraine, that they will have their back. They will have Ukraine's back. And of course, that is important to Volodymyr Zelensky to know that. If he didn't already know it, I'm sure he does, because it will be some difficult days ahead for Ukraine in terms of what Russia will be asking for. There's no doubt. It may be unpalatable for Ukraine, for the Ukrainian president to really contemplate and agree to, and he may decide at the end of the day that he can't. If he does decide that that is the case, that it's too unpalatable, then it's those European allies that he is going to be very reliant on, because it's likely that the US will step back completely from the sort of military support that is showing Ukraine. It's possible there may still be US weapons headed to Ukraine, but Ukraine will have to pay for them, or at least its European allies will have to pay for them on behalf of Ukraine. And then there's the issue as well over what the US continues to do in support of the intelligence that Ukraine absolutely desperately needs, the satellite imagery that gives them an indication of the position of the Russian troops and Russian infrastructure that Ukraine may want to go after in the likes of drone attacks, and of course is vital also in defending Ukraine from incoming drone and missile attacks. So there's a lot at stake here, and Volodymyr Zelensky will have to be very careful how he plays it, and it may be that nothing at all of any substance is decided here today, and that it's kicked a bit further down the road towards the more substantive talks that it's hoped will happen between Vladimir Putin, Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump at a later stage.
And just to remind viewers tuning in, there's our live image there from Washington, D.C., the White House entrance. Volodymyr Zelensky expected to get there in around about 2 hours' time. But ahead of that, Mark White, an extraordinary war of words has broken out. Donald Trump blasting on social media into his critics. And Mark, an astonishing thing, just literally broke in the last few minutes here, reports in the Wall Street Journal, the White House are also demanding that Volodymyr Zelensky wears a suit and stops turning up in his military fatigues.
Well, this will be very interesting to see what it does, because, you know, the kind of the military fatigues, or the sort of the absence of a shirt and tie replaced by a T-shirt, zip-up top, etc., usually green, sometimes black. That's his shtick, isn't it? That's what he wants to portray himself as the wartime leader. And as the wartime leader, he's not a suit wearer. In fact, he said after there was so much fallout following the absolute car crash that was the Zelensky-Trump news conference in the Oval Office, or at least news chat that descended into such vitriol. He said afterwards that, yes, I'll wear a suit when the war is over and my country is no longer at war. Now, that is true. He's got a point, you know. He wants to portray himself as a wartime leader, but you've got to balance that up as well with, you know, just common courtesy. You are in another country, you're not in a war zone, you've left that country behind. There's respect for the office of going to the White House that maybe dictates that you should make a bit of an effort. Well, let's see if he does. There's going to be so many things that are fascinating about this encounter a little later on. That's just one of them.
Yeah, the control, perhaps, the mind games have already started. Mark White, thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure for you joining us on the show. Now, I'm delighted now. I'm speaking with the former advisor to Volodymyr Zelensky, and that is Alexander Rodnyansky. Welcome to the show. An absolute pleasure to have you on the show, Alexander. What are you expecting to be, if you like, the least bad option for tonight? There's been a huge amount of speculation around the territorial demands, the succession that may have to be made, of course, the Crimea, the Donbas region. What are you hoping to be the best case scenario for Ukraine at the end of these talks?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. The best case scenario right now for Ukraine more generally, and as a result of these talks and negotiations, would be, of course, a freezing of the front line. So if there's an immediate ceasefire that everyone agrees to, and then negotiations that lead to us, the Ukraine, having the following: real tangible security guarantees for the first time in history. That will be a milestone. Some sort of reparations, although that's unlikely, or recovery help. That would be great already. And then, of course, that would set us free to develop and make sure that we are on a stable footing for future prosperity and development as a country yet again. And then we can talk about EU integration, whatever, economic reform, things that become important and primary objectives during peacetime. As of right now, we can't even think about this, so it's very unlikely that we'll get there today. But that would be, in answering your question, the best case scenario.
And Alexander, what about the thorny topic, perhaps, of NATO membership? Now, we're hearing, I mean, for Russia, it's always been a red line, way back from the days of Gorbachev. You know, NATO membership would have been seen as an advancement too far, but it has been put on the table by NATO themselves, by the European Union, by Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. But it still seems to be a red line for Vladimir Putin and for Donald Trump. Is NATO membership a step too far?
Well, you heard me say actually when I spoke about the best case scenario, I said tangible, real security guarantees. That is tantamount to essentially having Article 5 in NATO work for us as well. It doesn't have to be all of NATO. It could be one country, it could be several countries. The US would be tremendous. Then you would sort of have a North Korea, South Korea type model where you have US troops on the ground in South Korea, and that essentially allowed the country to become prosperous and develop freely over the course of decades, despite there never being real peace, only a ceasefire between North and South Korea, for example. So I would already see that as the best case outcome. Now, NATO itself, I think, is sort of always been a provocative point for the Russians. They've used it as an excuse and some sort of reason to invade. That was never real. We know NATO presence in Eastern Europe was minuscule before the invasion in 2022. It has been really diminished from large numbers to vanishingly small ever since the Soviet Union collapsed. So all of that was really just sort of an excuse to invade. And I think what Putin and what Russia is really after here, as we all know, is Ukraine's sovereignty. So that is really the question, under the rug or under cover for the Russian side, and we have to be careful not to compromise it, essentially. So what they want to achieve, and always wanted to achieve, is to reach some sort of conclusion, or maybe now a ceasefire even, or some sort of negotiated settlement where Ukraine would become unstable internally, and therefore a few years down the line, or maybe sometime down the road, they would have a renewed opportunity to invade or to destabilize Ukraine from within, and eventually lose its sovereignty. That's what the Russians, under the current leadership, are really seeking, and now we have to be careful about that.
Alexander, could I ask you quickly, if I could? We're hearing reports that the White House are insisting Zelensky wears a suit and loses his military fatigues. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard this throughout over the last months, and maybe ever since Trump became president. It's really been a perennial topic of discussion. So, I mean, this is really about the style, the form, not the substance, for me and for everyone who really looks at this carefully. I'm not sure what to say here, except that it's unfortunate that we fixate and that we talk about these issues when there's really larger things to discuss in the present setting.
OK, thanks for joining us. That's the former advisor to Volodymyr Zelensky, Alexander Rodnyansky. Pleasure to have your company. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is considering replacing a stamp duty with a new property tax, as well as an overhaul on council tax and homes sold for more than £500,000, as the Chancellor prepares ground for fresh tax rises in the coming autumn budget. Well, I'm joined now by the personal finance expert, Jasmine Birtles. Jasmine, welcome to the show. This will be sending out shockwaves to those who are selling houses. Now, you might say, oh, no, if you've got a £500,000 house, it's a nice problem to have. But, of course, at the moment, Jasmine Birtles, £500,000 in a lot of parts of the country doesn't buy you a lot.
No, it doesn't. And this can be seen as a particular attack on London. Of course, property taxes are, like any taxes, are a hot topic because what we're seeing at the moment is that stamp duty in particular is stopping a lot of house sales, and especially those above a million. If you go above $1 million, then the stamp duty is just an insane amount. So it's putting off a lot of people from moving, and it's another reason why we're losing quite a lot of millionaires and billionaires. But the property tax that they're suggesting, if it is starting at 500,000, then that could help the property sector, because at the moment stamp duty starts at 125,000. So if you buy a property, anything from 125,000 upwards, you're going to be paying at least 2% in stamp duty, which is not to be sniffed at. And once you get to 575,000, it's a higher percentage. And so if it starts at 500,000 and means that under that you're not paying any sort of tax, that could be a help, to be fair.
So, Jasmine, just spell out how this might work. I mean, at present, stamp duty is levied on buyers. If you're buying a house, you've got to find the extra wonga to be able to buy. Is this like a sales tax? So if you own an expensive house, you pay a levy when you sell. How will it work?
Well, good point. That's something they're still working out. And that it's not terribly helpful, to be honest. What we're hearing is that they're discussing it, that they're going to have this and potentially also an alteration to council tax, which will be also based on property. It'd be a national property tax. But the actual details are pretty sketchy at the moment, so we're not 100% sure exactly how it would work. And apparently, we'll need another Labour government, another term of the Labour government to really bed it in, and the likelihood of that is, at the moment, pretty small.
And Jasmine Birtles, the thing about property taxes, that we've seen them when they come in places like France, is that they can hammer people who are asset rich, the elderly, but cash poor. So it might seem fair on paper, but if you were sensible enough to have bought a house in a city, particularly somewhere like London, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, and you've been prudent and careful all your life, you're suddenly going to find yourself getting a huge Labour tax on your doormat simply because your asset's going to be in value.
Yes, and this is one of the problems that we have with this government, that much of their decisions are political, they're philosophical, they're not really practical, they don't look at the practicalities. But so one of the reasons why Rachel Reeves is looking at this is because it's very popular with her MPs, with the party, and particularly those on the hard left. So anything that involves a wealth tax, really a punishment of those, as you say, with assets, with some wealth, goes down very well with her MPs. Whether it goes down well with the country as a whole is something that doesn't seem to bother them too much until it actually happens, and then they have to do a U-turn. And certainly when it comes to the practicalities of it, i.e. how much money will it actually bring in, how much will it stop, how much money will it stop? Because if it stops people selling, then that's going to be a problem. That it's going to be like their taxes, you know, on sort of income taxes, where people stop working because they don't want to pay the higher income taxes. So if it does that, if it stops people selling and stops all the money surrounding sales, you know, sort of developing a property, doing it up, all of that, the moving costs, then that's actually going to be a problem.
Well, Jasmine, we've seen throughout history property owners being targeted, the spare room tax, the poll tax, the window tax, daylight robbery. Here we go again. Jasmine Birtles, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on the show. Now, still to come, President Zelensky will now meet with Donald Trump and other European leaders later this evening, including our own Sir Keir Starmer at the White House. Live pictures on your screen there, expecting to see Zelensky turn up in around about an hour and 3/4 time for those Ukraine peace talks. Can we finally see a breakthrough? Plus, an astonishing survey has shown that 87% of Brits now support deporting foreign rapists. And a further 47% claim immigration levels now impact women's safety. I'll be joined by the Women's Safety Initiative, who are calling for immigration limits from so-called dangerous countries. That's next with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
At GB News, we are proud to stand for you, for the Britain you love, for the communities you live in. That's what makes us the fearless champions of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we, at GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've read the headlines, you've heard what those in power have to say. How about now we actually get to the truth?
They would pay attention.
We go beyond the political theatre and tell you what's really going on behind the scenes. For a massive council tax hike, one of the biggest in the UK. Others follow their lines, but we go off script.
You sound like a broken record. You say that week after week.
Cutting through the narratives and giving you unique perspectives. That's Ben Leo tonight, Saturdays and Sundays from 9 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it? Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is 4:27 now. Nearly 9 in 10 voters now think that foreign sex offenders should be deported, according to an astonishing new poll. Now, with backing from people across all ages and political party backgrounds, agreeing that migrants who commit a sexual offence should be kicked out of Britain. And now this comes amid a wider debate about the impacts of mass migration and the housing of asylum seekers in communities. Well, let's now speak with the founder and the director of the Women's Safe Initiative, and that is Jess Gill, and that's the group that commissioned this poll. Jess, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. This is a real wake-up call. You've been saying for a long time that Women's Safe Initiative, that women across the country are starting to feel afraid for their safety. This is the first time we've though had concrete proof and data around this. Tell us your details.
Well, I think it's common sense that mass immigration has impacted women's safety. I mean, what do you expect when you import millions of working, fighting-age men to this country who come from countries which fundamentally do not respect women? And the thing is, the people who have held these views, they've been labelled as extreme, as bigoted, as far right, when none of that is true. I mean, looking at the poll, it just consolidates it. 9 out of 10 voters believe that we should deport sex offenders. That should be common sense policy. It isn't. Look at Abdul-Azidi, the Clapham chemical attacker. He was already in trouble for sexual assault, and he was an illegal immigrant. And because he was able to get away with it, he was able to attack another woman by it. And that was illegal immigration, not to mention legal immigration. And I think when you look at the statistics, you might say, oh, but 1 in 10 believe that. That's not even true. 3% of the people we polled actually said that they oppose it. The rest were just unsure. I think they shouldn't be unsure, and I think we have work to do with that. But I think the majority of people agree that we should deport sex criminals, and the ones who disagree are the extremists. They're the ones who are in the wrong, and they're the bigots against women.
And Jess Gill, 47% overall think that immigration levels have impacted women's safety. Huge political disparity. 84% of Reform voters, only 29% of Labour voters. And an incredible thing that leapt out as well is this contentious topic of should we limit immigration from countries perhaps with a more questionable regime and record on sex offences. We hear about Afghans, for example, being 22 times more likely to commit sex offences. And even here, almost 40% limit immigration controls now.
Yeah, so the poll said, I believe, that 4 in 10 wanted to restrict immigration from countries which do not allow women rights, basic rights. And I think part of the reason why there were so many people unsure about it, specifically women who are unsure about this one, is because the media has been propagandizing them to believe that when they think of immigration coming over, they think of women and children, and that's just not the case. The reality is that we've imported so many men who have just disrespected the women of this country. And that's why, as our poll says, almost half of the women in this country feel that mass immigration has directly impacted their safety in their area. And the other half are probably just sheltered or unaware of it. And I think the reality is that this is why our campaign is needed, because since we've started the Women's Safety Initiative, we've had hundreds of women come up to us and say that it's directly impacted their safety. They can't walk across the street without being sexually harassed. They can't go on public transport. Even if they get a taxi, there's a risk of it. Every single aspect of public life. If you live in an area of mass immigration, you will be directly impacted by this. And women today are seeing the result of that.
And Jess Gill, it's an incredible report. It's sobering information, and particularly I think the political breakdown is fascinating. It seems at the moment the Labour voters are out of touch with the majority of the electorate. But the Green Party, what on earth has happened to the Green Party? The Green Party used to be tree huggers, and now this data pointing at an alarming, I think, tolerance towards this kind of thing and a reluctance to place any barriers upon future immigration. Jessica, it's a fantastic report, sobering but important. Thanks for joining us on the show today. Really do appreciate your company. That's Jess Gill, the founder and director of the Women's Safety Initiative. Thank you very, very much indeed. Lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including a top police chief who has said it is madness the amount of offences shoplifters undertake before they are actually and finally put behind bars. And she also says they're set free by the courts to simply offend again. I'll be speaking to her next.
Hello, very good afternoon to you. The top stories this hour. Sir Keir Starmer has touched down in Maryland for high-stakes talks with Donald Trump and European leaders on Ukraine. President Zelensky says Russia deliberately struck Ukraine ahead of the Washington meetings, calling the attacks cynical, with 10 killed. In the UK, pubs are closing at a record pace, 8 a week in the first half of 2025. Government figures show 209 have already been lost to rising taxes, wages and business rates, leaving pub bosses heartbroken. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is planning to roll back environmental protections, calling bats and newts obstacles to growth. She's pushing for reforms to speed up infrastructure projects. Prince Harry has quietly honoured his late grandfather with a letter placed at the National Memorial Arboretum. The note praises Prince Philip's humility and respect for fellow veterans. And the Cambridge Dictionary has added over 6,000 words from slang like skibbity and delulu to terms reflecting new work habits and environmental concerns. Those are the headlines for now. More news at 5.
Take the GB News family with you on any device. As long as you have an internet connection, tune into GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow, quite similar to today. Quite a lot of cloud around, but there will be some bright or sunny spells and just a few scattered showers in the southwest. Most places dry thanks to this area of high pressure. It's been a very warm one across parts of western Scotland. Lots of sunshine here, but around the high we have been seeing quite a bit of cloud streaming in, particularly to eastern areas, and that cloud likely to thicken up overnight. In the southwest of England, we've also seen 1 or 2 showers affecting Pembrokeshire also, and still 1 or 2 more of those to come overnight. Maybe even the odd heavy one, but most places staying dry. Most places keeping the temperatures up as well in the teens, perhaps down into single figures in rural parts of Scotland where it does stay clear. Quite a great start then to tomorrow morning. Maybe that cloud thick enough for a bit of drizzle across northeast Scotland and hills of northeast England, but generally it will be a dry start, and western Scotland again should do okay for sunshine. Elsewhere starting fairly dull, I suspect, through the central belts. Quite a bit of cloud coming in overnight across Northern Ireland too, and most of England and Wales seeing a cloudy start to Tuesday, but some breaks in the cloud on the south coast of England, south coast of Wales and the west coast of Wales too. It's in the far west I think we'll see the best of the sunshine again on Tuesday, but again the chance Pembrokeshire, Devon, Cornwall, Somerset of 1 or 2 showers breaking out during Tuesday. Very hit and miss, but you might even catch a rumble of thunder, see a flash of lightning. So a few heavy showers here, but many places staying dry, quite grey again in the east, and as a result pretty chilly temperatures on those North Sea coasts with a strengthening breeze only in the teens, whereas where we see some sunshine we should see temperatures into the 20s. Again, a lot of cloud to start with on Wednesday. We're a bit more optimistic. We'll see a bit more sunshine coming through during the day. Shouldn't have any showers in the southwest either. Quite a fresh feel again on those eastern coasts with some sunshine elsewhere. Temperatures in the low 20s.
Crash Law 24. sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. The A90 is closed northbound at Glendoick due to an incident. Motorists should consider alternative routes. Roadworks on the M4 eastbound at junction 43 in Landasi have led to on-slip closure with diversions. An overturned vehicle has closed lanes on the M4 westbound in West Berkshire, causing delays. In Brighton and Hove, a collision closed all lanes on the A27 westbound between the A293 and A270 until this evening. And on the trains, there is disruption between Plymouth and Penzance and between Weymouth and Dorchester West. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back. Time is 4:36 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Britain's high streets are under siege from brazen shoplifters, and the courts are simply letting them off the hook. And that comes a warning there from the policing chief, Katie Bourne. Now, with gangs swarming Oxford Street and thefts hitting record highs, she's pushing for electronic tags to stop repeat offenders and help protect struggling shopkeepers. Well, she joins me now, and that's the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Sussex, Katie Bourne. Katie, welcome to the show. A pleasure to have your company. An astonishing 500,000 offences last year, a 20% increase since 2023, and a feeling amongst the public that shoplifting basically is just now legalised.
Yeah, and I share that concern as well. I mean, what does it come to that we're at this point where it's become so brazen that people go back time and time again, and there seems to be no deterrence for them, and they just get away with it? Shocking.
And Katie, we've seen cases where people have been having 70, 80 plus convictions. They never see the inside of a jail cell. And isn't that part of the problem? We're seeing violent criminals be released because our clinks are full. There's no wonder they're just stealing with impunity.
Yeah, they need a deterrent. People don't commit crime because they think they're going to get caught, and there's a meaningful deterrent. But when you get to this point where they're going in, they're just stealing what they want, stealing to order, literally taking shelves, loads of stuff off shelves. Nobody challenges them. The police aren't around. And then if they do get caught and they're put in front of the magistrates' courts, they're let off with a fine. And they come back time and time again. I've seen people with more than 100 convictions that don't even go anywhere near prison. I mean, it is madness. But we need more deterrence in the community because the government are now letting people out on shorter sentences. So, shoplifters are going to go nowhere near prison. So we have to have some sort of deterrent in the community that works.
Katie Bourne, instead, we're seeing shop owners getting a visit from the police because they call shoplifters, well, actually, let's call them what they are, shop thieves. They call them scumbags, or they put pictures of them on their wall of shame and say, oh, that might contravene their data protection. It's a ridiculous state of affairs where the shop owners are finding themselves getting collared. But tell us about your electronic tag scheme. How will that work?
Well, I've been asking government for this for ages because, if we're not going to send people to prison, we need some form of meaningful deterrent. And I've just got fed up with waiting for this government. They talk a good talk, but we're not seeing anything coming. So I thought, well, do you know what? We're going to run a pilot ourselves. So I've got sat down with our chief constable, got her full support. We have a detective inspector who already is used to the tag system, the GPS tagging system, because we use it for stalkers and domestic abusers already in Sussex. And he's pulling together a plan on how this will work. But I need to work with the courts as well and get kind of local permissions in place. And then we can tag people and we can track them and ban them from shops. And we know if they've been in them.
But isn't the problem, it tends to be a small amount of offenders committing a huge amount of the offences. Now, everybody knows them in their community. They may have substance abuse issues. They may have addiction issues. They simply might not care about the consequences because there aren't any.
Well, I think you're spot on, and particularly if they've got a drug dependency or they're stealing to feed an alcohol habit, they're not going to care. And I was with a prolific shoplifter just this morning, and he was saying to me that when he was doing it, It was the thrill of it as well that was quite exciting. What we need, as I said, is those meaningful deterrents in the community. Because if we're not going to send them to prison, if they've got a drug habit, they need to break that cycle. We need to get them into a program where their drug dependency can be broken. But most importantly, they need to know there is a deterrent there. Otherwise, it will just carry on as it is, which is a little bit out of control.
You know, a lot of people will listen into this and they'll be split on that, because on the one hand, you're right, you know, addiction clearly is a huge driver of multiple theft, not just for the items themselves, but you see them being flogged in your local boozer by a smack addict who just wants a few quid for their next hit. So do we go down the route of not quite hug a hoodie, to quote David Cameron, but to be more liberal, to be more tolerant, or actually, do these people just need a short, sharp, bang them up?
Well, I've written that they need a sort of metaphorical punch on the nose, if you like. So they need to know that there's a police response, and then they need a meaningful deterrent. So yes, if they've got a drug habit or they've got an alcohol habit, they need help to correct that. And that's where, you know, health services need to work together with police to do this. But also they do need to understand that what they're doing is wrong. But you know what really gets me is that when they steal, they're often stealing to order, and they're selling these items on. So there is a secondary market. So if members of the public are going to the boot fairs or they're going down their local market and they see cheap booze or cheap stuff, guess what? It's probably stolen. And actually, you're part of that problem as well. So, you know, say no to the cheap stuff that you see that's being stolen on the corner shop, because you're just not helping issues. But let's make sure that those criminals, because you're right, it is theft and it is a crime. Let's make sure those criminals know they're going to get caught and that there is a meaningful deterrent. If we get them, you know, clearing up litter, painting fences, doing whatever it is, putting things right in society, make them pay for their crime, but in society, if we can't send them to prison because there's no space.
Now, Katie Bourne, I had a shop owner on my programme last week, and he said the thing that works is shaming these people. You know, putting their pictures up around the community, making them look like scumbags. There you go. Maybe the police will come and visit me for using that word. But the general public do believe that most shoplifters are scumbags. And yeah, we can be tolerant and understanding they may have an underlying substance abuse. But the issue is this: perhaps they just need to be shamed. Let's stop being so soft-soaping towards them.
I think the pendulum needs to swing back to somewhere sensible, doesn't it? Because it's clearly gone far too far onto the criminal side of things. But, you know, don't get me started on GDPR. We need a data sharing law with protections, not a data protection law, because people hide behind it and they won't share information. They won't share data with each other. Our retailers weren't doing it until recently. And then you get these ridiculous situations where the police will say to a shopkeeper, oh, no, you can't put someone's picture up because of their human rights. I mean, it is complete madness, really. And you're right, the shame is part of it. And it helps, actually, the investigation as well.
OK, thank you very much. That's the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Sussex, Katie Bourne. Pleasure to have on the show. Thank you very, very much indeed. And moving on, the trial has begun for two men accused of child abuse as part of the NCA's Operation Stovewood, which is investigating rape gangs in Rotherham. Now, the defendants deny rape back in the 2000s, and I'm joined now by GBNews' national reporter Charlie Peters, who's there for us outside Sheffield Crown Court. Charlie, over to you.
Well, Martin, at the start of this two-week trial, the two defendants, Obaidullah Omari and Shafakit Hussain, both 46, were said to have exploited a set of highly vulnerable girls who were described by the prosecution as attractive to those who would seek to exploit young, vulnerable girls. And those defendants were said to have befriended both of those girls when they were 12 or 13 years old in Rotherham, and both in the care system in the 2000s. Now, Omari, known as Naj at the time, was accused of raping both of the complainants. He's facing 4 counts of rape and 2 counts of indecent assault, while Hussain was said to have raped one of the defendants after befriending her. Now, Omari, who appeared in the dock in a purple T-shirt and wearing a religious skull cap, was said to have bought one of the girls cigarettes, alcohol and cannabis as he sexually groomed her. The jury heard that he attacked the girl at his house and alleged that he did so on a mattress on the floor. And then when this happened, the prosecutor, Matthew Bean, said that others would have been present at the house, including other men, but alleged that Omari made it clear that she belonged to him. One of Omari's charges relates to a girl who was said to be under 13 at the time of those alleged offences. For Mr. Hussein, Shafaqat Hussein, of those 3 charges, he is also said to have groomed the girl, offering her allegedly cocaine during one of those encounters. This trial is expected to last 2 weeks. Both men deny all of the charges and the trial continues.
Jolly Beats there live for us at Sheffield Crown Court. Thank you. Now, if you've searched some holiday sun this year, then here is the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
The heat isn't quite as intense as it has been across parts of Europe, but nonetheless it is still hot and sunny for many Mediterranean areas, and indeed across the Canary Islands and Madeira, fine and very warm here. The heat's still there across Iberia though, so some very high temperatures here. A few thunderstorms for southern France and across inland parts of Italy, but mostly sunny in coastal parts, and Greece and Turkey will stay largely fine, sunny and very warm over the next few days, with lots of sunshine and temperatures in the low 30s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
27 now. Heaven, Health and Beauty in Shropshire is celebrating the official unveiling of their royal warrant today.
Well, it's been recognised as the supplier of skincare products and treatments to Her Majesty the Queen after she first used the company's products 19 years ago. She's a loyal customer.
She is a loyal customer. Jack Carson has been getting the treatment.
I was just like, I wish my mum was here to see this.
There's a beaming smile on the face of Heaven, Health and Beauty founder Deborah Mitchell as she celebrates the unveiling of their royal warrant. Starting her business with £10 in her pocket in 1995, Deborah says she's worked from the ground up and started providing skincare treatments to Her Majesty the Queen 19 years ago. Today she says she's honoured to be a recipient of a royal warrant.
It is a feeling that you cannot explain, but I was very lucky before having the royal warrant when Camilla Parker Bowles was Camilla Parker Bowles, and I didn't tell anybody I did her treatments. It hit in the press, and then this product, which is the bee venom made from bees, makes the skin look younger using a Botox alternative.
The King and Queen have granted royal warrants to almost 400 companies that supply the royal household, with each one lasting up to 5 years. It also means those companies can display the royal arms on their products. Director and daughter of Deborah, Ella Mitchell, makes this business a family affair, and she's made sure the packaging is already getting a fresh look. Ella says she's proud the products are made in Britain.
The achievement itself, you feel proud to be British, and I think that's one of the core values of us.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 5. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a second council has now vowed to remove English or British flags that have been attached to lampposts by patriotic campaigners. Tower Hamlets in East London said it would take down the St George's flags as soon as possible. Now, bearing in mind that Palestine flags have been festooned across the borough since October the 7th, 2 years ago, that might come as something of a surprise to people watching this show. Let's join my next guest now. That's the president of the Flag Institute, Malcolm Farrow. Malcolm, welcome to the show. Isn't it incredible that in England, in Great Britain, councils are now taking umbrage to flying our own national flags to the point where they're physically taking them down?
Yes, it's a very curious situation. I mean, there are several ingredients in this, and you have to take a nuanced approach to it. Firstly, I would not sit here and suggest that people broke the law. That would be irresponsible of me. However, there is nothing better, nothing more splendid than flying one's national flags in the borough to encourage community spirit and community cohesion and sense of common purpose. And there's no way that a flimsy flag, which is no more substantial than a headscarf, flying from a lamppost is going to do any harm. What I would suggest is that the council works with the community, acknowledging that the community wants to do this, and then helps them to do it in a proper and appropriate way on what is obviously council property, namely the lamppost, or indeed anywhere else. I would like to see flags flying everywhere because they are absolutely essential ingredients for bringing people together in a sense of common purpose under a symbol. That's what flags are. They're a symbol of unity. So it's an extremely good thing to do, but the council should take a more nuanced approach, encourage the community, work with them, and to do it in a way that benefits everybody and doesn't do anybody any harm.
Malcolm Farrow, we hear all the time about two-tier policing, two-tier justice. I put it to you, this is two-tiered attitude towards flags. Tower Hamlets, I go through the area. Palestine flags are everywhere. It's the same in Birmingham. And we heard the other council, Birmingham, has taken down St George's flags. They're too afraid to take down Palestine flags. I put it to you that when you start taking sides over flags, you increase division.
You're absolutely right. You should certainly not take sides, and that is absolutely not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that we should start with our national flags, our national symbols of our own nation, be they the national flag or be they a county flag or a town flag. They are flags for the community, bringing people together in common purpose. They should be the first ones to be encouraged. And then, for example, here I fly a Ukrainian flag and have done for 3 years, and will go on until Ukraine is free from Putin's attacks. So flags have a great meaning and are very symbolic, but they need to be treated properly and with dignity, and the council should be encouraging this and working with the people, not against them.
OK, Malcolm Farrow, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate your time. Now, a spokesman for Tower Hamlets told GB News this: while we recognise people wish to express their views, we have a responsibility to monitor and maintain council infrastructure. Where flags are attached to council-owned infrastructure without permission, they may be removed as part of routine maintenance. Now, coming up, President Volodymyr Zelensky will meet with Donald Trump and other European leaders. Live pictures on your screens there now of that historic door at the White House. We're expecting in the next few moments Sir Keir Starmer to be entering the White House ahead of that historic meet between Putin, Zelensky and Trump soon. That's next.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow, quite similar to today. Quite a lot of cloud around, but there will be some bright or sunny spells and just a few scattered showers in the southwest. Most places dry thanks to this area of high pressure. It's been a very warm one across parts of western Scotland. Lots of sunshine here, but around the high we have been seeing quite a bit of cloud streaming in, particularly to eastern areas, and that cloud likely to thicken up overnight. In the southwest of England, we've also seen 1 or 2 showers affecting Pembrokeshire also, and still 1 or 2 more of those to come overnight. Maybe even the odd heavy one, but most places staying dry. Most places keeping the temperatures up as well in the teens, perhaps down into single figures in rural parts of Scotland where it does stay clear. Quite a grey start then to tomorrow morning. Maybe that cloud thick enough for a bit of drizzle across northeast Scotland and hills of northeast England, but generally it will be a dry start, and western Scotland again should do okay for sunshine. Elsewhere starting fairly dull, I suspect, through the central belts. Quite a bit of cloud coming in overnight across Northern Ireland too, and most of England and Wales seeing a cloudy start to Tuesday, but some breaks in the cloud on the south coast of England, south coast of Wales and the west coast of Wales too. It's in the far west I think we'll see the best of the sunshine again on Tuesday, but again the chance, Pembrokeshire, Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, of 1 or 2 showers breaking out during Tuesday. Very hit and miss, but you might even catch a rumble of thunder, see a flash of lightning. So a few heavy showers here, but many places staying dry, quite grey again in the east, and as a result pretty chilly temperatures on those North Sea coasts with a strengthening breeze only in the teens, whereas where we see some sunshine we should see temperatures into the 20s. Again, a lot of cloud to start with on Wednesday. We're a bit more optimistic. We'll see a bit more sunshine coming through during the day. Shouldn't have any showers in the southwest either. Quite a fresh feel again on those eastern coasts with some sunshine elsewhere. Temperatures in the low 20s.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBnews.com. The M77 southbound at Junction 2 offslip has restrictions due to a collision, so motorists should allow extra travel time. The M4 eastbound at Junction 11 has roadworks with diversions in place. In Leicester, the M1 southbound exit slip at Junction 23A is closed due to a collision. Brighton and Hove's A27 westbound is shut between junctions A293 and A270. And on the trains, Cross Country sees disruptions between Plymouth and Penzance, while Great Western Railway faces issues between Weymouth, Dorchester West and Newbury. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
What does it feel like to be a Great British Giveaway winner?
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God, I'm going to cry.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
Yes, that is fantastic.
You know, you have no idea how much I needed it. Oh my goodness.
You've won £54,321.
Please don't joke. I just would change my life.
Oh, thank you so much. I was gobsmacked. Thank you, GB News.
I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
You really could be our next big winner. Head over to gbnews.com/win now to find out how and get your entry for the Great British Giveaway. Great prizes, even greater wins.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
You've read the headlines, you've heard what those in power have to say. How about now we actually get to the truth?
They would pay attention.
We go beyond the political theatre and tell you what's really going on behind the scenes. For a massive council tax hike, one of the biggest in the UK. Others follow their lines, but we go off script.
You sound like a broken record. You say that week after week.
Cutting through the narratives and giving you unique perspectives. That's Ben Leo tonight, Saturdays and Sundays from 9 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Live pictures on your screens now from the White House in Washington, D.C. President Zelensky of Ukraine will meet with President Donald J. Trump and other European leaders, including Keir Starmer, at the White House for those Ukraine peace talks. We're expecting Keir Starmer to arrive in around about 10 to 15 minutes' time. We saw him land a short while ago, about an hour ago, in fact. There you can see Keir Starmer touching down in Maryland at a US Air Force base, and before getting into the Beast, one of those cars, to go towards the White House. But can they finally pull together and agree a deal and bring an end to the war in Ukraine, or are we set for yet more extraordinary scenes like this?
Gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. So tonight is the night. This is expected. A lot of people hoping this will be the huge breakthrough. Volodymyr Zelensky, the second time at the White House. You can forget back in February, it was the ultimate political car crash when Donald Trump steamed into Zelensky after reporters lambasted him for not wearing a suit. We've heard in this past hour that the White House now demands that Zelensky wear a suit tonight. What will he wear? That's the first topic. The second topic is we're seeing Keir Starmer land, going to be followed by Emmanuel Macron. Ursula von der Leyen, yes, the president of the European Commission. She was a defence minister in Germany, so bad she ordered the wrong materials for German tanks. It simply wouldn't work. Other leaders expected the German leader, the Finnish leader, to show solidarity with Zelensky, whatever that means. They're simply spare parts at a wedding. This is the meeting between Donald Trump and Zelensky. What happens tonight will roll through to a chat with Vladimir Putin. What on earth do these European Union leaders think they are playing at? Get in touch. GBNews.com/your say is the way to do so. But now it's time for your headlines, and here is Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Just after 5 o'clock. Well, Keir Starmer is now in the United States ahead of those talks later today on Ukraine taking place at the White House. The meeting comes just hours, though, after Zelensky accused Russia of strikes that killed 10 people. He says Vladimir Putin wants to humiliate diplomatic efforts. Downing Street has signalled Keir Starmer could back a peace deal without a ceasefire as a precondition, while Donald Trump has already ruled out Ukraine joining NATO or reclaiming Crimea. Those talks are expected to focus on potential robust security guarantees for Kyiv, though the Kremlin has yet to respond. Here, meanwhile, pubs are vanishing from Britain's streets at a rapid pace, with 8 shutting for good every week in the first half of this year. Official figures show 209 pubs were demolished or converted by June, as rising taxes, higher wages and business rates take their toll. Industry leaders call the closures heartbreaking and are urging the Treasury to deliver tax relief in the autumn budget. 100 NHS diagnostic centres in England are now open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. The move aims to cut waiting times and speed up diagnoses, with more than 7 million checks and scans carried out since July. Care Minister Stephen Kinnock told us the changes will help thousands of patients get seen sooner.
A vitally important role in terms of maximising access for people. So if it's open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, even people with busy working lives can very rapidly get an appointment. They have the whole spectrum of diagnostics, from MRI scans to CAT scans to X-rays. And it's going to really help because they're embedded in communities. They're in your local shopping centre, maybe in your local university.
Stephen Kinnock there speaking to us earlier today. In other news tonight, Chancellor Rachel Reeves is preparing to ease environmental protections to accelerate infrastructure schemes. The Treasury is drafting another planning reform bill that could scrap parts of European nature rules blamed for blocking developments. Ms Reeves says the changes are essential to drive growth and raise living standards, repeating her criticism of bats and newts as economic obstacles. And that comes as the Chancellor is also considering a property tax overhaul, replacing stamp duty with a new property tax on homes sold for more than £500,000. The Treasury proposal, still at an early stage, could also pave the way for reform of council tax, which is currently based on 1990s property values. Rachel Reeves says the changes would aim to boost fairness and raise revenue without breaking Labour's pledge not to increase taxes on working people. The mother of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell, shot dead in her own home in Liverpool, is urging communities to speak out against gun crime. Her death was the third fatal shooting just a week on Merseyside, and now Olivia's mother Cheryl and other bereaved families are working with the group Evolve to reclaim neighbourhoods worst hit by serious and organised crime. 3 years on, Cheryl says the pain is indescribable and that no other family should suffer the same.
I think one of the biggest successes of the Evolve project has been the 300% increase in community intelligence from our communities. That is obviously really significant because it means the communities do have more confidence in the police now. They're coming forward, they're telling the police or Crime Stoppers or whatever route they're using, they're telling them what's going on, and that means the police can take action against these criminals that are causing this harm. So I think that's a really positive narrative in terms of the relationships that have been built between the police and the community since then.
And just before I hand you back to Martin, let's take you live to scenes of Times Square in New York, where an active police investigation is currently underway in the area. That's after police evacuated all public from the scene earlier today. After reports of a suspicious package found in Times Square, NYPD officers, including bomb squad technicians, are responding to that situation just around 10:30 local time in New York. You can see there those live scenes on screen. It appears public are now re-entering the area after that initial warning, and the cordon now appears to have been lifted. But public also still at this stage being urged to avoid the area.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And let's take a last look at the markets tonight for you. The pound will buy you $1.353 and 1.159 euros. The price of gold is £2,471.97 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 9,132 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sam. Now the moment is upon us because later today, President Volodymyr Zelensky will meet Donald J. Trump at the White House after their disastrous meeting back in February. Now, this time, other European leaders, including Keir Starmer, who touched down in the United States a short while ago, as you can see on your TV screens there. For those listening on radio, Keir Starmer landing, being greeted by dignitaries in Maryland at an RAF base, US Air Force base, before being whisked to the White House. We're expecting him to arrive momentarily. Now, might tonight's historic meet be the final step towards ending Ukraine's war with Russia, or will it be yet another false start? Well, let's speak now with GB News' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. We're around about an hour away, we believe now, from Volodymyr Zelensky meeting with Donald Trump. Before that, our own Keir Starmer will be received once again in that White House entrance. Mark, I've been asking you for the entire show. I want to ask you again, what's the point? What do these European leaders hope to get out of this? This is a straight-up heads-up between Trump and Zelensky. Who cares what the European leaders have got to say?
Well, they claim they've been invited by the US president, and the reason that they're there is to show solidarity with Volodymyr Zelensky, to show the Ukrainian president that they have his back. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure what they'll do beyond standing there. It's a pretty expensive trip just to stand there for the visible pictures that image will then portray for the world. But, you know, that's clearly what not just Keir Starmer, but obviously Emmanuel Macron, Giorgia Meloni, the Finnish president, the European Commission president, and of course the head of NATO want to do. They feel it's important to show that at this crucial time they are full square behind Volodymyr Zelensky, because there is a lot of concern about just what the Ukrainian president might be asked to compromise on to ensure that there is some kind of a lasting peace in Ukraine. We don't know the details really of what Russia has asked for, the speculation, of course, which has been doing the rounds since Friday, is that he wants to effectively keep hold of the territory that he has already gained after 3.5 years of fighting, which is about 1/5 of the landmass of Ukraine. And we've heard repeatedly from Volodymyr Zelensky on this issue that this is not something that he would be able to decide upon, that actually any decision about giving any of the territory over to Russia would have to be the subject of a referendum. And that, he says, and understandably, cannot happen while there is still a war raging in Ukraine. So if that was to be the demand of Russia that is put to Ukraine, if Ukraine was willing at least to seek the opinion of the people, then some kind of a ceasefire, you would imagine, would have to be put into effect to allow that referendum to take place, because it couldn't happen at the moment when you have cities, as we have seen again overnight, like Zaporizhzhia, and also other areas within the Donbass, in particular, like Kharkiv and other areas, being struck by drones and missiles launched from Russia.
Well, it's worth reflecting there on Ursula von der Leyen. You recall back in 2019, she was the German defence minister. A German defence minister so incompetent that only half of the Bundeswehr's new tanks, fighter jets and helicopters were actually fit for service. The procurement was so bad, she was accused of large-scale mismanagement in all areas. Seems a bit rich, Mark White, for European leaders to be going to the White House and telling Donald Trump how to negotiate the end of a war when they were incapable of fighting one themselves. And Mark White, I put it to you again, a red line for Vladimir Putin all along, and indeed previous successive Russian presidents, was a strict no-no to Ukraine joining NATO. And yet we're hearing today, number 10, Sir Keir Starmer, saying that Ukraine is now on an irreversible path, quotes, to NATO membership. Is this helping the negotiation with Donald Trump if they're going in and making demands that Trump clearly thinks are off the table?
Well, I mean, they can make those demands and public statements wherever they are around the world, but in terms of the deal that is going to be, such as it is, that's going to be put to Volodymyr Zelensky, that is going to be put to him by Donald Trump out of earshot of those other world leaders. So it's for Volodymyr Zelensky and Volodymyr Zelensky alone to react and give Donald Trump his verdict on what Donald Trump has managed to secure from Vladimir Putin last Friday. You mentioned Germany. Of course, it's Friedrich Merz who's there now as the Chancellor of Germany, representing Germany at the White House. They've really had to be dragged kicking and screaming into a more meaningful contribution to Ukraine's fight against Russia. And it has to be said now, they are the biggest contributor in Europe. But for a long time, as you said, it was quite farcical. At the very beginning, all they were offering really Ukraine in the way of assistance were helmets, medical supplies and alike, no military support. A lot of that, of course, stems from Germany's history, and they've really had to waken up to the new realities on the European continent and have had to now up their spending on their own military, which is actually something that Donald Trump very much welcomes. He wants Europe to be much more alive to what it needs to do in the... Now, let's see who's getting out of the car here. Is it the first to arrive, Sir Keir Starmer? It's Mark Rutte.
No, it's Mark Rutte from NATO.
He has been one of the biggest fanboys of Donald Trump of late. We've all had to sit through some of the more excruciating exchanges between him and Donald Trump. He really knows how to kiss the ring of the US president, that's for sure.
You're exactly right. And in fact, Mark Rutte, I think, had one of the most profitable trips to the White House, perhaps, of any of the world leaders, because, of course, Donald Trump has been saying to European leaders all along, pay your way. America has been defending Europe for decades, Mark White. And it was Donald Trump who finally said, you know, enough of being addicted to American dollars, pay your own way.
Yes, absolutely right. And it gets us back neatly to the point we were making just before Mark Rutte and his vehicle pulled up at the front of the White House there. He, of course, is delighted and must absolutely love Donald Trump, because it's Donald Trump's rocket up the proverbial of European leaders, which has ensured that many more of those European leaders have dug deep into their pockets and upped their security budgets. And that, and the fact, of course, that they are dealing with the reality on the ground, which is a war raging within the continent of Europe and a real live threat on their doorstep. But regardless, it absolutely feeds in to what Donald Trump has been telling them for years, that you need to get serious about your own defence and make sure that you are funding your military operations properly to be able to do what you need to be doing in the likes of Ukraine, which is getting in there and giving Volodymyr Zelensky the support militarily that he needs on the ground, and not leave it to the US all the time.
Mark White here. We can just see a second vehicle hoving into view. Let's see who gets out of this after Rutte. It is Ursula von der Leyen.
Hey.
That's it. Hey, the party is really getting started, Mark White. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, next along that hallowed red carpet.
The party poppers are popping as we speak. It's going to be a very, very, I'm sure, enlightened chat, because they're going to have to spend quite a bit of time together, off in an antechamber somewhere, waiting for the big boys in this case, which are President Trump and President Zelensky, to do their talking before they come and then effectively give the readout to the European leaders. So it is, listen, we keep saying it, but it's an awful long way to come to play no active part, really, in the big decision-making process, which is the decision that President Volodymyr Zelensky will come to, having received the news in person from President Trump.
OK, Mark White, stick with us as we wait for further foreign dignitaries to arrive. I'm bringing my next guest now. I'm joined by the Professor in International Politics at the University of Birmingham and an expert on the Transatlantic Alliance, David Dunn. David, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. What do we expect is going to happen? The huge question here, of course, is there perhaps now will have to be a set of very unpleasant decisions being made for Volodymyr Zelensky in terms of the territorial carve-up. The situation remains likely that the Crimea area and perhaps parts of the Donbas area will have to be surrendered to get to this peace deal. What's your thoughts on what many people are calling a huge surrender and betrayal of Ukraine?
Well, I think it's right. I mean, Donald Trump went to Alaska saying, I'm going to demand a ceasefire. I'll not be very happy if I don't get one today. And if not, there'll be consequences, serious consequences for Putin. After 2.5 hours of being charmed and flattered by Putin, he came out and said, OK, we're not going to have a ceasefire and we're not going to put any pressure on Russia. And by the way, not only are we going to consider giving the land that Russia's occupied, we're going to consider the land that Russia wants that hasn't even been able to occupy. So a huge diplomatic faux pas failure on the part of Trump, huge victory for Putin, and the Europeans are coming to be engaged in serious diplomacy to try and beat them.
OK, thank you, David Dunn. We're back to those live pictures now at the White House. Of course, we're expecting a succession of European leaders. This looks like that's flying the Union flag. This very much like Sir Keir Starmer is the next international leader to arrive at the White House. And indeed it is. Out steps the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer, to be welcomed. Third to arrive, Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, was first. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, second. Now Sir Keir Starmer making his way into the White House, the first leader actual leader. Don't forget it's von der Leyen wasn't elected by the public. She was elected by members of the European Parliament. I digress. Let's get David Dunn back in now. David Dunn, we were talking there about the potential territorial carve-ups. Of course, it's going to be unpleasant for Zelensky. Everybody knows that. But David Dunn, what's plan B? Donald Trump made it perfectly clear all along he wasn't in this as a forever war for the endless billions of tax dollars that would entail. Now this is down to the final wire. Perhaps some cessation of territory is something that just has to be done.
Well, there's a question of whether some cessation of territory. That's not the issue. The issue here is whether actually Putin gets to claim stuff that he hasn't been able to conquer militarily. It depends how weak Trump will be in following the demands of Putin. And what the Europeans are there is to try and put some backbone into things, far from being vassals and having no part, as your report erroneously suggested. What they are there to do is to say to him that actually the whole of European security is dependent.
What power has Keir Starmer or Ursula von der Leyen got? They've got none whatsoever. Get real.
They have the power of veto over what he can do, because they can say, we're not putting up with this. And actually, if it comes to it, we will support Ukraine to keep fighting,
the power
even
of veto.
if you have lost the bottle for it.
What do you mean the power of veto? Does a deal with Volodymyr Zelensky, and if Zelensky does a deal with Putin, how on earth can Ursula von der Leyen, a person who couldn't even run the German army, have a power of veto?
We're talking facts here. So what the power here is that Zelensky is not going to agree to Putin's demands as relayed by Trump. And the Europeans are here to say that we support Zelensky in that, and we're not going to let you do this. That's what's going on in the White House there.
Are you seriously suggesting, David Dunn, that any deal done between Donald Trump, Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin can in any way be vetoed, stopped or prohibited by Ursula von der Leyen and Keir Starmer? Are you seriously saying that?
As usual, you're not listening, Martin. What I said was that Zelensky will not accept that deal, and he will be supported in rejecting that deal by his European allies. What they're not going to do is to allow Trump to be the mouthpiece of Putin and try and enforce completely unreasonable terms on Zelensky and on the rest of Europe, that will be detrimental to European security.
David Dunn, it won't make a blind bit of difference what Ursula von der Leyen thinks. It won't make a blind bit of difference what Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron or any of them thinks. As unpleasant as that is for you to accept, that's the reality.
Well, that's your subjective and biased opinion, Martin. That's not true.
No, it's not biased. Show me. Where's the legal redress? What power do they have? Anywhere. Show me.
What I'm telling you is that they are supporting Zelensky in rejecting the idea that he should give up the rest of Donetsk. Okay, and as you will see, as it transpires over the next few days, that assessment is likely to be more accurate than yours, I think.
What do you mean? It's not a case of accuracy. You said that they have a power of veto. I said that's fantasy.
Yes, they will veto the idea that the Russians will be able to actually annex the rest of Donetsk. Okay, what they will say is that we are in solidarity with Zelensky, and we reject the idea that that's an acceptable end to this war. That's what I meant, and that's what I said.
Yeah, I mean they can not accept it all they like. They can be really unhappy. They can stamp their feet. They can roll around on the floor like a toddler if they want. My point to you, David Dunn, it won't make a blind bit of difference. That's the point. This is the deal that's being done between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, and they can posture all they like. They can show solidarity all they like. They can say they don't like things all they like. It won't make any tangible difference. David Dunn, thank you for joining us on the show. I'm joined now by the Ukrainian MP for the European Solidarity Party, who represents the city of Odessa. There's Lysky Gonkachenko. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. Can I ask your opinion on this thorny topic of what we may expect, maybe some unsavoury news for Volodymyr Zelensky in terms of the territorial map after this deal?
Hello. First of all, my name is Oleksiy Goncharenko. Thank you very much for the invitation. Secondly, maybe you hear we have again air raid alert. here in Odessa, which shows that the war continues till when the leaders are meeting in the White House. Thirdly, you ask about territorial concessions. I heard part of your previous discussion. The problem is, and you should understand this, and that's something which I hope now Zelensky and other European leaders will explain to President Trump. The whole idea of Putin about that Ukraine should voluntarily leave the part of Donetsk region which Ukraine still controls is absolutely a trap. Why? Ukraine can't do this. For your understanding, first of all, this is hundreds of thousands of people. What to tell to them? It's not completely ruined area, like part of area which is in the war where it's almost no people. No, these are cities where people live. And what to tell these people and how to do this? Secondly, this area, Russia can't take this area for more than 11 years. More than 11 years. The whole war started in 2014 there in Donbass. Why? Because this is a very, very complicated area to take. There are a lot of natural obstacles, mines, there are big cities, and this area is heavily fortified. In reality, this is a fortress. This is a fortress which Russia cannot take by force, so they decided to take it by these diplomatic maneuvers. Thirdly, definitely people of Ukraine are also against all this. And we have constitution which also forbids any moves like this. So Russia clearly understands that it will be not acceptable. That's why they're pushing this just to win the time and to continue the war. I want to remind you, before the summit, Alaska summit, was started, when before this, President Trump said, I will go in the room. If Putin is not ready to end the hostilities now, I will understand it in first minutes and I will leave. Putin was not ready, Trump did not leave, and now Trump is sending, now Putin is sending President Trump on the wrong direction. He's saying, oh, what for you need this ceasefire right now? Let us make a big, beautiful peace deal. But you understand that in the world like this peace deal, it will be extremely difficult. It will take weeks or months just to fix all the details. So why President Trump is leaving his absolutely right track when he was saying, stop killing of people now, stop the killings, and then let's fix all the details. We're not asking Ukraine to withdraw, we're not asking Russia to withdraw. Stay wherever you are, where you are, control these territories, but let's end killings and let's speak. Instead of this, now Trump is trying, maybe he will try to put pressure on Zelensky, I don't know. But even if he will try, Zelensky just can't do what he wants. So the only way out of this is just to come back to position which was before Alaska, when Trump and the whole Europe and United Kingdom all were saying, stop killing now, make ceasefire now, and then sit and speak about everything you want, but without any, demands at the beginning, in advance. No, first stopping of killings.
OK, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your passionate opinion. I really mean that. Thank you, Alexei Goncharenko. That's the Ukraine MP for the European Solidarity Party. He represents the city of Odessa. Now, we've got live pictures back on your screen now. And a short while ago, we saw Giorgia Meloni arrive, the Italian Premier. She was the second leader in after Sir Keir Starmer. Before that, Ursula von der Leyen, and then Mark Rutte, the chair of NATO. Let's go back to Mark White now. Mark White, the thing that strikes you there, talking to a Ukrainian politician, is that this is going to be a very, very difficult process moving forward. Huge loss of life, heartbreak, devastation. We should never forget the evisceration and the loss of life and property and land and pride and sovereignty and everything that this war has entailed for the wonderful people of Ukraine. But Mark White, we're at the moment now where reality bites and difficult decisions will perhaps have to be made to end this war. And that could mean a territorial carve-up, which would leave a lot of people very, very unhappy.
It was brought home in stark terms again overnight with Russian missile and drone strikes on a number of Ukrainian centres of population, leaving 10 dead, including an 18-month-old child, and hundreds who were injured. So clearly, I mean, the people of Ukraine have lived and breathed this for 3.5 years. There is nothing more that they would love than to see a ceasefire here, to see an end to these hostilities. But what they don't want to do, of course, is reward Russian aggression, which is what many people in Ukraine would see is the sum total of giving vast tracts of land to Vladimir Putin would be rewarding that aggression. However, the sort of realist point of view also will tell many of them that in order to get a lasting peace here, there will have to be quite unpalatable compromises. And it's how you get to that point and how you achieve those compromises and what the plan of action would be. Are we looking, and it doesn't seem thus far that we've got a ceasefire, is it going to be the negotiation before somehow work towards a ceasefire first that can then allow more substantive negotiations about what territory to cede to Russia, what territory perhaps that Russia currently holds, Ukraine may be able to gain back from Russia. Certainly, I think the option that we've been hearing, and understandably from many Ukrainian commentators who've been on, they want to see the ceasefire now and then the negotiations, not the negotiations first, because all that is going to allow Vladimir Putin to do is to keep bombing Ukrainian cities, to send over missiles and drones to fight along those front lines, Martin.
And we have another dignitary arriving now. This is the chief of Finland arriving, Mark White. One by one, the European leaders turn up to offer solidarity. Not quite sure what that would translate to on paper. Mark White, I've been a bit facetious and throwaway perhaps about some of this earlier on today, but there was a serious point made on Friday night. And the everlasting forward-moving peace in Ukraine could involve British troops being deployed, boots on the ground, if NATO aren't allowed in, because that's a red line for Vladimir Putin, perhaps. This coalition of the willing we've heard so much about, Mark White, this could have implications for the deployment of British troops. It's an idea that's been floated constantly. It's an idea, Mark White, that brings a lot of concern to British citizens.
And understandably so. That was President Stubb of Finland representing those Nordic and Baltic states, the states closest to Russia and the ones who are more alive than any European nations to the potential threats that Moscow poses. And you're right, the coalition of the willing, they are countries whose leaders are willing to send their troops potentially into harm's way. Now, we don't think they will go right up to the front line, to the hot zone, if you like, where clearly, even if a ceasefire is called, there has been so much fighting over the last 3.5 years, so much bad blood. It's hard to see that there wouldn't be frequent incidents where that ceasefire is breached for a time. So putting any other nation's troops there would be very dangerous indeed. I think it's more likely that if British and French and German troops go into Ukraine, they'll be in the centres of population. They'll be there around the critical national infrastructure in those cities. They will also be allowing, for instance, the training of Ukrainian troops, which happens to a great degree here in the UK, to be moved from the UK in country back into Ukraine, where British troops, training personnel can go to Ukraine and they can train those Ukrainian recruits in their own country, which is obviously much better for all concerned. So it would be that kind of thing, that the boots on the ground that the likes of Sir Keir Starmer is proposing. So it's not necessarily right up there preventing the fighting on the front line, but is a reassurance of sorts that there are other nations in there, in centres of population, acting as some kind of guarantor. There's other issues still to be decided upon about air security. And again, Sir Keir Starmer has said that would be an option, that Royal Air Force jets could be used to help police the skies over Ukraine. Again, that is potentially a much more risky venture, because those combat jets would have to be right over, by very nature of what they're doing, would have to be right up there on the sort of border between Russia and Ukraine, ensuring that there are no breaches in the ceasefire, and it could put them in harm's way. But all this is part and parcel of trying to ensure that there is a lasting peace, that if there is a ceasefire while negotiations continue, that it is abided by. There are no safe options when going down that route, but clearly Europe's leaders, well, many of them at least, are willing to go that step, to put their troops in some capacity on the ground within Ukraine.
OK, thank you, Mark. If you're just joining us on GB News, you can see live pictures here from the White House, just ahead of that historic meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, and Donald J. Trump, of course, the president of the United States. A short while ago, we saw the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, go through that entrance there into the White House. Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, and also the premiers of Italy and Finland. We're awaiting the German Chancellor and, of course, Volodymyr Zelensky himself. The crunch talks are due to begin about 6:15, we believe. And a huge concession we have to talk about, Mark White, coming quickly back to you for comment if I could. Huge amount of pressure on America themselves. Donald J. Trump was very outspoken in the run-up to the previous election that they didn't want to be pumping endless billions of dollars into this war, this forever war. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, echoing that, saying we need to get this over, and also saying that the European Union leaders, they're not coming here tomorrow to keep Zelensky from being bullied. That's not true. That's a stupid media narrative. And Mark White, once again, a lot of people asking, why are these European leaders there?
Well, I think in terms of pumping billions of extra dollars into Ukraine, it's understandable that the US administration and the people of the United States don't want to have to keep doing that. It's exactly the same here in the UK and other European nations. They want an end to hostilities as well. And whatever those who are opposed to virtually everything that Donald Trump says or does, whatever they might say about him, and we heard it from the speaker before Ukrainian speaker, clearly not a fan of Donald Trump and what he believes Donald Trump has failed to achieve in his negotiations with Vladimir Putin, or quite how he knows, I'm not quite so sure, in that, all that really has been out there has been informed or ill-informed speculation. Donald Trump is the only Western leader who thus far has actually got the sides back around the table after 3.5 years of inertia. Nothing has been done in all of the years that Joe Biden was president. There was condemnation on a regular basis of Russia, and no attempt in any meaningful way to bring Russia back around the negotiating table. It was exactly the same with the European leaders. Lots of condemnation on a regular basis, lots more money for Ukraine, but lots more money and military assistance that never actually gave Ukraine the decisive victory that it yearned for. It only ever kept Ukraine in the fight. And Donald Trump has calculated, and many would say quite rightly, that that is just not sustainable over the long term, that there needs to be a solution to this long and bloody conflict, and that will mean compromise, and it might be too unpalatable for the Ukrainians, but it needs to happen, and we'll see. At least he is getting them round the table, as we see now another of the motorcade arriving here.
Yeah, this is the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He's the last of the big European Union leaders to arrive here today. Macron, of course, is still due. Macron late to the party. Dramatic late entrance. He likes one of those, we hear. But the fact of the matter is, Mark White, again, it brings this question, you know, Donald Trump, one of his huge achievements, you could argue certainly from the electorate of America's point of view, is getting these European Union nations, getting the United Kingdom to cough up their fair dues, to pay up into the NATO coffers. That's why Mark Rutte, the first to arrive today, he looked like the cat that had got the cream. Because finally, Donald Trump is trying to make Europe police itself and stop them being so reliant upon America.
Yeah, and listen, the whole thing about NATO is they're not giving money directly to NATO anyway. This is their defence. And that's why Donald Trump has for years now been so incensed about many European countries not willing to invest in their defence. It's not about giving to the club. It's about ensuring that their own country's military is properly invested in so that they can make a meaningful contribution to this alliance that they are part of. And he quite rightly has pointed to the fact that many European countries, with the exception of a few, likes of the UK, didn't even meet the then 2% commitment of their GDP. Well, now they are all on the road, if not having met that, and many are going over that. We know that the UK has said that it will increase. We've heard Sir Keir Starmer talking about the way in which the world has changed, and we need to ensure that our military is capable of dealing with the threats today. However, we're not going to give that increase for another 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road. So it's urgent, but it doesn't seem to be that urgent. To be fair to him, of course, every country has everything else that a budget within a country needs to deal with and prioritise in the way of the day-to-day priorities of any country going forward. But military should absolutely be right up there amongst them. So Keir Starmer, other European leaders say they are cognizant of that, and they are going in the direction of increasing their military spending, Martin.
Yeah, Mark White, we can see there one of those magnificent US Marines holding the French tricolour aloft. That surely shows us the next dignitary to arrive will be Emmanuel Macron, the president of France. And pictures I'm seeing here on other news sources on social media just show quite a dramatic picture of one of Zelensky's chief of staff, the deputy head of his office, walking in with what appears to be a large rolled up map of perhaps Ukraine. So we really are approaching the moment now where we're getting down to brass tacks. European leaders will be in, and then finally to arrive will be Volodymyr Zelensky. Mark White, excellent as ever. Let's get to my next guest now. I'm joined by the former British Army intelligence officer and an expert on international security, great friend of the show, Philip Ingram, MBE. Philip, always a pleasure to have you. Perhaps a sign there of what may come, seeing one of Zelensky's aides walking in with what appears to be a giant rolled-up map to the citizens of Ukraine, to the politicians of Ukraine, to the world, but certainly to Ukrainians first. What happens next is going to determine their sovereignty, their borders, their history, and redefine their past.
Oh, of course. And, you know, I think the fear of the wider world is reflected in the number of European leaders and leaders of different international organizations that have gone to accompany President Zelensky in this meeting in the White House, and of course to try and show support so that he doesn't get ambushed in the same way he did at the last meeting.
Do you think, though, when all's said and done, showing solidarity is great? You know, we can all show solidarity to our friends, but it won't really count for a row of beans, will it? I mean, nothing that Ursula von der Leyen or, dare I say it, Sir Keir Starmer says will have any impact on what Donald Trump agrees with Volodymyr Zelensky tonight.
Oh, it'll have a huge impact on it, the level of support that's going in. You know, Donald Trump may have thought he has made his mind up, but he changes his mind frequently. And we don't know what he's been thinking after this summit in Alaska with Vladimir Putin. It's quite clear that Putin came away on top after that summit, feeling even more emboldened. You could tell the change in the body language between the handshake at the beginning, whenever they first met, to the handshake at the press conference. And Putin left with a massive grin on his face, feeling very, very emboldened indeed. And I think the European leaders and the leaders of the coalition of the willing are going to point out to Donald Trump the potential global threats for trying to force Ukraine to give any territory away. And of course, your UK Defence Intelligence today analysed how long it would take Russia to capture the areas of the Donbass that it hasn't captured so far. And they reckon it would take another 4 years and 1.9 million more casualties at the rate of advance the Russians have shown so far. So the numbers are horrific. Putin can't survive those, and this is a message that will be being put very clearly to Donald Trump. And the precedents it would set, it's being watched very closely by Xi Jinping to see what he'll do over Taiwan.
Philip Ingram, a lot of people will be watching this show and thinking, what does this necessarily mean for the United Kingdom moving forward? We heard some very concerning revelations. We've heard them over the previous weeks, but on Friday evening and over the weekend, further discussions that it could even involve British troops on the ground, British boots going into Ukraine, because, of course, NATO membership may be a red line. I put it to you, Philip Ingram, we seem incapable at the moment of defending our own borders. Is it really the correct thing to do to start sending British troops to Ukraine?
Well, defending our own borders from those that are crossing in the Channel is not a military task at the moment, and I don't think nor should it be a military task. That is a border force and a policing task to deal with it. Yes, we should have boots on the ground potentially. We've got boots right on the border with Ukraine, helping to provide logistics support. We've got Ukrainians being trained in the UK, and that's taking up UK military capability. There would be nothing wrong with moving that into Ukraine, and it would be logistically much better to do. It wouldn't be boots on the ground in where the front line was and policing that, from what I understand. That would be much more difficult. But you know, there's an awful lot of misreporting going around trying to sensationalize what would be a relatively straightforward task.
Philip Ingram, just interjecting slightly there, because the final leader to arrive, there he is, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, the final leader of the European leaders expected here in Washington tonight. Emmanuel Macron stepping in, likes to see himself as the de facto leader of the continent of Europe. Emmanuel Macron going inside the White House now. And I think the final guest to arrive now, Philip Ingram, all eyes next. Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to arrive. Philip Ingram, briefly return to that topic of the European liability and the succession of failures historically to cough up the full amount of our security. Is that part of the problem? For too long, Europe had a weakened defence capability, overly reliant on the United States, and it just allowed Ukraine on that front line there to be kind of in the firing line, as it were.
Oh, it's hugely part of the problem. And our failure in Afghanistan is what Vladimir Putin will have gone, Europe and the United States is licking its wounds after that, and therefore now's the time to go in. Thank goodness Europe is now stepping up. Europe is stepping up faster than the UK is stepping up. We have to remember that although the government announced an increase in the defence budget to 2.5% of GDP with a plan to go to 3%, they're also taking the huge amounts of money that's being paid to Afghans being resettled in this country, and the cost of the Chagos Islands is coming out of the defence budget. So in real terms, in its first few years, we're suffering defence cuts at a time when there needs to be an awful lot more money put into defence. And that is something that won't go unnoticed.
Philip Ingram, you bring up a couple of excellent points there, both of which are very painful for the British taxpayer. The Chagos Islands, 30 billion quid, potentially more. I mean, Keir Starmer originally said it was 3.4 billion quid. Suddenly, it's actually more like 10 times that. The Afghan resettlement scheme, we still don't know the true cost of that. And meanwhile, further support to NATO, ramping up our own security measures. This can only mean yet more huge bills. And isn't that the point? These foreign wars become a huge liability for the British taxpayer at a time where a lot of taxpayers are getting wearisome of that, Philip Ingram. But no doubt you're going to tell me this is money that the UK must spend.
It is money that the UK must spend, because we have to remember we're the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. We are a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, and we rely on a global economy. You know, the amount of extra money that's going in defence pales into insignificance when it comes to the cost per person in this country compared to the amount of money that people had to fork out with the energy shock that came whenever Russia invaded Ukraine with its full-scale invasion in February 2022. And if this continues, the economic shock around the world will cost people even more. And if Ukraine is forced to give up territory and Xi Jinping decides to go into Taiwan, the economic shock that we had with the energy price increase with Russia going into Ukraine will seem like small change down the back of the sofa. And therefore, we have to be in a position where we deter these despot leaders from trying to take other parts of a country by force. I don't think people would be very happy if someone came into their own house and decided to annex their living room and their kitchen and then negotiate giving back the living room but keeping the kitchen. And this is really an analogy as to what Ukraine or people are suggesting Ukraine may be forced to do here.
OK, Philip Ingram, MBE, always a pleasure to have on the show. Thank you very, very much for your expertise. Let's get back now to Mark White. Mark, we're hovering over these historic pictures here. We're waiting for Volodymyr Zelensky to arrive at the White House. We believe now the last of the European leaders, has entered the White House, Emmanuel Macron being the dramatic late arrival there. There was a conversation earlier on. It seems facetious. It seems like a small point, but I want to talk about this demand the White House seems to have made that they expect Volodymyr Zelensky to be wearing a suit. Because the last time around, they were saying he was in his military fatigues, and they've had enough of that. Is that a minor point, Mark White, or actually is this part of the bigger power play here? The White House trying to control everything here, even down to what Zelensky wears?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because the information we have is that Volodymyr Zelensky will be wearing a suit. It's perhaps not the sort of shirt and tie combination that we would classically expect from a suit, more like the black dark suit that he was wearing when he was at number 10 the other day, meeting and embracing Sir Keir Starmer. So it's still a suit. It's showing a little bit perhaps more respect for the office, because I think there were many within the Trump administration who felt offended by Volodymyr Zelensky turning up not in a suit at all and looking, you know, rather casual in his sort of khakis. But, you know, that is him. He wants to portray the image of being a wartime president. Of course, he is a wartime president. Those that argue that, OK, you are not in your country now, you can certainly afford a wardrobe. Perhaps when you leave the country, you need to dress more appropriately when you're meeting other influential leaders from around the world. But I think Volodymyr Zelensky's point is, look, he's a wartime president. He wants to always adopt that persona wherever he is around the world. And he had said, actually, in light of the row that erupted over the way that he was dressed in February for his meeting in the Oval Office, that yes, he'll wear a suit when the war in Ukraine is at an end. Well, that's clearly not quite true, as he will be wearing at least some kind of suit combo this evening.
Yeah, maybe this smart but casual approach shows at least we're some way towards ending the war. But as part of the ceremony there, Mark White, we can see the pictures on our screens. That is of the Ukrainian flag there being unfurled now, next to the US flag at the entrance there of that White House Oval Office. That's the sure sign that the next dignitary to arrive will be the main man himself. Well, after Donald Trump, of course, Volodymyr Zelensky expected to arrive. And Mark White, nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows what will happen next, certainly in that Oval Office there. The last time these two met there was perhaps one of the most disastrous political meetings in all of history. On the upside, Mark White, it can't be worse than that.
And I don't think either side want to see a repetition of the utter car crash that occurred back in February. I'm sure both sides will be going out of their way to ensure that whatever happens, even if there is not agreement on the way forward here, that it is a cordial exchange between the two men.
It's a sombre time, no doubt, for many people around the world looking at this. It is an endgame. It is a resolution. It is hopefully the beginning of the end of that savage, brutal war, the meat grinder in Ukraine. A lot of people still believe that Vladimir Putin invaded, took what wasn't his, and may now get to keep the spoils of war. We don't know what the carve-up of this territory will be. Perhaps nobody, as we learned throughout history, wins in war. A lot of people think Vladimir Putin may come out on top. Will the Crimea be forever gone to Russia? Will the Donbass region forever belong to Vladimir Putin? What happens next in terms of the involvement of the European Union, of the United Kingdom, of NATO? History in the balance there. Live pictures from the White House as we're awaiting Volodymyr Zelensky to arrive at the White House for this huge historic meeting. Up next is Jubes & Co. I'll be back at 7 p.m. to pick up then with GB News Tonight. Martin Daubney, I'll be back then. But up next now is Jubes & Co.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Motorists should note the road traffic incident on the M73 northbound between Junction 2A and Junction 3. Caution is advised and extra time is needed. Roadworks on the M4 eastbound at Junction 43. Landasi have caused diversions. Congestion on the A13 westbound in Thurrock is causing a 15-minute delay. In Somerset, a broken-down vehicle on M5 southbound at Junction 24 has closed one of two lanes. And on the trains, Great Western Railway services between Weymouth and Dorchester West are disrupted. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors